Hello and welcome to Legal Bites. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we explain the law one bite at a time. We don't give legal advice, but we do talk about how the law works and try to look into our crystal ball to see how things might turn out. If you're enjoying this on YouTube, we'd love it if you could like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with friends, all the great YouTube-y stuff. And if you want to listen while out and about, we're now offering our live streams in podcast form where you can leave a rating and review. Links are in the description below, as well as to our clips channel where you can find some of the best clips taken from our live streams. Otherwise, if you want to catch me elsewhere, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you want to support the channel, you can do so on Locals, Patreon, or by becoming a YouTube member, or by buying some really awesome Legal Bites merch. Again, all links are in the description below. And with that said, let's get into it. All right. Oops. Mike is over here. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are coming from. I hope you're having a great day, a wonderful day. And it's a Wednesday, so happy hump day. Let's see. Oh, joining me here is Kurt from Uncivil Law.
True now. The matching continues.
Oh my God. So I'm glad you got that memo.
Matching backgrounds, matching shirts. All right.
Can you get out of my brain? How did you know that I was going to wear burgundy today?
Just seemed like a burgundy kind of day. I don't know. Oh, Lord.
It did. It did for sure. Oh, man. That's funny. So how's it going?
It's going good. This trial is interesting. I have complaints against black on black on black on black lawyer guy who's chewing in court. He's driving me crazy. I want to punch him in the face. Whatever. No, definitely not.
That's what folks in my chat were calling him because of his suit.
Well, yeah, that's an insult to John Wick, though. I refuse to designate him that way. That just seems, no, absolutely not. But he's apparently chewing gum in court, and it was driving me absolutely crazy.
I was somehow I was able to kind of look past it and focus on the testimony, but it was very distracting. And I'm surprised that this, not all judges are the same, right? Some judges have certain things that they are sticklers about, others are like, whatever. Apparently this judge doesn't have a thing about someone chewing gum in the courtroom. And the thing is, initially, I thought that this guy was maybe like staff in the firm or something. If he was reading testimony, like maybe as a paralegal, maybe I don't know, or something like that. I had a hard time. I didn't want to believe that he was an attorney, but then I saw the website. The website was Emily D. Baker sent me a link to the website, and she was like, "Yep, he's an associate." And I was like, "Holy crap! This guy's actually. He's a baby lawyer, but he's a lawyer nonetheless."
I'm gonna send him an email saying, "Stop chewing gum in court, you jerk."
I'll
tell you what. If I were a judge, I'd be like you and only you. Approach the bench. We're having a moment now.
Well, I would venture to guess that he probably is already getting emails, because I don't know if you get emails during these trials, but I often do, like people that are either happy or unhappy with things that I say and do. So I would venture to guess that he probably is getting emails about his gum chewing, and hopefully
the disrespect.
Yeah. And the thing is, he also he just hit everything about his body language just screamed, "I don't want to be here. I don't want to be doing this." So that's why I was like, he can't possibly be an attorney, right? Like this has got to be the most exciting thing to happen at this firm right now, because not only is it you're actually going to trial in a civil law firm, a firm that practices civil law. That's rare on its own, but then it's also involving a celebrity, and it's involving the media, because of, it's all being broadcast all over the world. So
those community theater classes are not working out for them.
Could you let the lawyers know the jury's on the way?
Let me turn down this volume here.
Yeah. A lot of volume.
You know what though? I do appreciate that after so many trials of people screaming at us to turn ourselves down because the court feed was so low. I feel like Long Crime and Court TV, like they finally got the memo that they're like, oh, our feed is too low. We need to turn that up. So I appreciate the fact that we need to actually.
It's not wearing black today. We're in a more casual suit, maybe. So it took some criticism to heart.
Okay. I mean, I didn't mind the black on black on black. Like it's whatever. I don't know. Different courts are going to be more particular. But
this watch was black. It had a black band on a black watch that was blacked out. It was all black.
I mean, I don't know. I can't defend him. I can't defend his style choices.
Who wears a black suit anyway? A little much.
I mean, a black suit with like a different colored shirt, sure. Probably a different colored tie also. Because if you wear a black suit with a white shirt, black tie, that's look like a limo driver.
Yeah. On the plus side, Math Daddy was a good witness, so I enjoyed that.
Oh, he was great. He was fantastic. He's my favorite expert witness right now.
I see that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like easily, because I'm not a math and sciences person. You know this. We've talked about this before. And he made it so that I felt like I could follow along and understand and not be just completely bored. So I thought it was a very effective direct, very effective cross-examination by the witness, not by the other side.
And I realized we took a few witnesses out of order.
Yes, you did.
But at this point, does the plaintiff rest its case?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Wait, so there's no further cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
I love how the plaintiff is resting its case like 8 witnesses deep into the defense's case. This is the most bizarre trial order I've seen in my life.
Yes, that part has been very confusing.
So wait, is
Mr. Black
is the plaintiff still on the stand or not?
Dr. Black.
I'm confused.
I guess not. If they close their case in chief, cross-examination is over, which is
okay.
Thank you.
Morning.
I feel like there was more there for them to go over.
Once you get situated, if you can state your full name and spell it.
Okay, let's get this witness's name. Dr.
My name
something.
is Carl Milton Black, CarlMilton BLACK.
In case you guys missed it, the reason I asked the question is because they interrupted the cross of the plaintiff.
By just asking you.
So I was under the impression that the plaintiff was technically on the stand this entire time, even though we've had like 8 other witnesses.
This case.
So I don't know what's happening now.
2009 through 2021.
And what expertise do you have that allows you to opine on imaging?
Thank you for starting with that part.
Scans.
Yeah.
I'm a fellowship trained neuroradiologist. I also have fellowship training in vascular and interventional radiology, and I'm double board certified by the American Board of Radiology in neuroradiology and vascular and interventional radiology.
And is there anything about that experience and training that is relevant to your opinions in this case?
Yes, I have expertise in analyzing imaging of the brain.
Okay. And let's just go over very quickly the images that you reviewed. Maybe give us the type of image and then the years that those images were taken.
The imaging consisted mainly of CT, Doppler, and MRI. The range of years dated back to imaging performed at the Veterans Administration Hospital in 2009, and then subsequently imaging again at the Veterans Administration in 2016, imaging performed at COG-FX in 2017, and subsequent imaging performed in 2021 at Blue Rock Medical or Riverwoods.
And does that mean that you reviewed imaging both before the ski accident and after the ski accident?
Yes.
And in your review of the imaging, did you see any evidence of traumatic brain injury after the accident?
No.
Did you see any evidence in the imaging before the accident that might be consistent with Mr. Sanderson's post-accident symptoms?
Yes.
and we'll talk about the specifics of those. Are you also familiar with Dr. Gibby's opinions in this case? As the jury will recall, Dr. Wendell Gibby is plaintiff's radiology expert. Are you aware of that?
I have reviewed the reports that were provided by Dr. Gibby on imaging that he performed in 2021. I've also reviewed his deposition that he provided to the court.
And so you're familiar with his opinions in this case?
As reflected in his reports and his deposition, yes.
In addition to the imaging itself, did you read the reports that were created by the radiologist who took that imaging?
Yes.
I'm really glad that he's doing the
look
direct
at
call of
those
the experts.
reports in detail. I just want to make it clear that what you've reviewed, you feel like you've reviewed everything you needed to
I enjoyed his
assess this
Spotify.
imaging that you've described.
Yes.
People are talking about that in the
both
chat. I haven't
imaging
seen it. I
itself
haven't come across
and
He's
it.
good.
Reports
He's good.
associated with each of
Nice.
Okay, so I want to start with an exhibit the plaintiff or the jury has already seen. It's a exhibit to Dr. Gibby's deposition. I believe you've seen this. I'll show it, and for reference, I know it. We marked it as one of plaintiff's exhibits, and I'm forgetting the number now. I just had it in my head. Do you guys recall?
Which one?
This one right here. We added it to the end. I apologize. I had it in my mind, and now I've forgotten. Well, while they're looking that up, Dr. Black, have you seen this image before?
I have.
And what is it?
This is a axial image from an MRI performed at CogFX on October 18th, 2017. Specifically, it's a FLAIR T2 sequence.
And do you understand CogFX or Cognitive FX to be Dr. Fong's clinic?
That's my understanding.
Okay, just to help the jury, they have heard from Dr. Fong. So an MRI was taken at Dr. Fong's clinic. Were those green arrows part of the MRI initially?
No, those were, I believe, placed by Dr. Gibby during his deposition.
Okay. And what do you understand those to mean? What did Dr. Gibby put those arrows there for?
Those arrows are pointing to what he's terming white matter disease.
And what is white matter disease?
White matter disease reflects scarring in the brain, and often it occurs around the ventricles that you see here. In the deposition, Dr. Gibby's using these arrows to point to areas where he suspected that these may relate to trauma.
I see. And I'm noting that Peter Jensen on my team just noted that this is Plaintiff Exhibit 31, I believe, to the record. Okay, so those same points that we're looking at with the green arrows, in your understanding
Well, that
of Dr.
explains that, I
Gibby's
guess.
opinions, is he pointing to those as evidence of post-collision problems for Mr. Sanderson?
That's what he indicates in his deposition, yes.
But in your review of the prior imaging, do those same findings show up?
If you review the imaging from 2009, at which time Mr. Sanderson had a comprehensive imaging workup that included imaging of his brain as well as the blood vessels that supply his brain, these findings were present in 2009.
I see. And I believe you've prepared some images that you've taken from the prior to the accident images and post-accident images and noted those. And is that correct?
That's correct.
And we'll show those to the jury in just a second. But what I want to do while we have this one up is give you a pointer and have you point to other findings that.
Oh,
you
they have
see
a pointer.
in
They have
this,
pointer technology now instead of using the
MRI
microphone.
from 2017. Is that okay? Will that help you?
That
explain
pointer, I
to
think, has
your
been there
opinions
since the
about this
beginning.
image?
Okay.
I think I remember someone early on
Okay.
using it, but
Bring it
All
to you.
right.
May I approach, Your Honor?
sadly, not everyone has been using it.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Black. So you've talked about the green arrows. What other findings do you see here?
finding that was consistent over.
Can't hear it.
Yeah, should we get him a microphone? Sorry. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
All right. Details.
Does that work?
Get him something so we can all hear him.
This study does show imaging that was, or findings that were demonstrated over a decade of imaging, in this case, dating back to 2009. One of them was a mild degree of cortical volume loss or loss of brain volume. The other was in this area here, these are the ventricles, and it showed as disproportionate enlargement of the ventricles relative to the amount of tissue loss in the gray matter and overall brain volume. The findings around the ventricles, these white areas, are very typical of what's called microvascular disease, where brain matter around the ventricles is deprived of oxygen over a long period of time, and that results in gliosis or scarring. This pattern is very typical of what we call microvascular ischemic white matter disease, and that was present in 2009.
And did I hear you correctly earlier? Do you have specialized training in those particular findings beyond what a typical radiologist might have?
My fellowship training and experience in neuroradiology and consistently reading brain MRI gives me expertise in looking at these findings, which we often see on a regular basis.
I see. So this is a post-ski collision image, correct?
This particular sequence is from 2019.
Right.
My understanding is the accident occurred in 2016.
Yeah, and I think you said 19, but you pointed to
Yes,
2017.
I'm sorry, 2017. Yes,
Right.
correct.
Yes, and so you said earlier, I believe, that the same findings you're pointing to, again, not just Dr. Gibby's findings with the green arrows, but the other ones you just talked about, they're in the pre-accident images. Is that right?
Yes, my review of the imaging that was done at the Veterans Administration Hospital in 2009 shows these similar findings. And in the reports that were provided by the neuroradiologists who read the imaging at
That's
that
really
time,
nice that they have
describe these
MRIs
findings.
that
Right.
predate
Okay.
the
So
injury
let's,
for the comparison.
maybe
That's
have you
really
sit
nice
down
for
again
the plaintiff
and
or
I'll
defendant.
pull
That long predated
those
too.
slides that you
Yeah.
made. Thank you.
From 2009 and with a disease that is known to be degenerative in nature. So
Yeah.
that's a really strong case for Gwyneth Paltrow on this side. Although it still sits alongside this eggshell skull argument,
So
which
this is
I don't think it
Exhibit
necessarily
101,
eliminates that completely.
A through, I believe it's A through F.
No, I think
And,
you're right. It's like
MRI
if
moved to admit
yeah,
this
so it's
as
just a
a
question of
demonstrative exhibit.
what caused it. Was
No
it
objection.
natural?
Exhibit-
Was it from her?
Defense
Was it
Exhibit
some
101 A through
combination?
F is received for demonstrative purposes.
Exactly.
Assuming she did it at all, of course,
Thank you,
which
Your
is the
Honor.
first
So,
thing you have to reach.
Dr. Black, do you recognize
course.
this slide?
Yes, this slide is also what's called a flare sequence, a T2 flare sequence done in what's called an axial plane, which just means the orientation, the way the image was acquired through the brain. This image was acquired in March of 2009 at the Veterans Administration Hospital.
So that's before the accident, correct?
Yes,
Yeah, and again, when I say accident, I mean the ski collision in 2016.
yes.
And it's not terribly easy to see, but I can call it out here. There's a little arrow. Do you recognize that?
I put that arrow there, yes.
Okay, and what does it point to?
That arrow points to white matter disease, similar to what Dr. Gibby had pointed out in the imaging from 2017.
Right. Okay, so in other words, this is a prior finding that's the same as the post-accident finding Dr. Gibby saw.
Yes, about 8 years earlier.
Okay, got it. And what is this finding associated with?
Again, most commonly we see this with what we term microvascular ischemic white matter disease. There are predisposing risk factors for this, where in some patients it may be accelerated, but it's typically a process that's due to pathology or abnormalities in the very small, some of the smallest blood vessels that supply the brain, particularly around the ventricles.
Then I'll go to the next one, which is 101B, and again, call out a section here at the bottom. There's kind of a faint red arrow. Again, did you put that there?
I did.
And why'd you put that there?
Because it again shows the same pattern of white matter disease that was demonstrated on MRI of 2017.
Okay, so again, a finding before the accident that was there also after the accident.
That's correct.
And what's this finding associated with?
The exact same description.
Got it. Okay, then if we move to 101C, there's yet another red arrow. I take it you put that there.
Yes.
And is it again to point out that Dr. Gibby's finding of post-accident problems in that area preceded the accident?
Yes, accounting for technical differences away in the plane of the way this exam was acquired from 2009 to 2017, these findings are identical.
Right. Got it. Okay. And they're also associated with the same things you've described already.
Most likely microvascular disease, and that's when he underwent his comprehensive imaging workup at the VA hospital in 2009. It was also attributed to vascular disease at that time.
Okay. So number defense exhibit 101D is like your same version of that 2017 image that Dr. Gibby looked at.
Correct.
And it has those same spots. So I'll just use the laser here. That again, these arrows are kind of faint, but they're pointing to those same points we've just looked at previously. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then if we go to the next image, this is a new image we haven't looked at, correct?
Correct.
And this one's from 2021, as it's marked. Where was this image taken? Do you recall?
Yes, this image was obtained at Blue Rock Medical or Riverwoods Imaging, which Dr. Gibby owns. And this is the same sequence that we've shown before as far as how it is technically obtained by MRI. Same slice.
Got it. And again, we have some arrows, correct?
Correct.
And those are your arrows?
Yes.
And they're showing, I take it, the same disease process or same findings that you've seen in the 2009 and then 2017 images.
That's correct.
So you're seeing this same condition in the brain for many years, both before the accident and after it.
Over an 11-year period, a similar pattern of white matter disease, yes.
And then if we go to the next image, 101F, we call out that upper left quadrant arrow. And again, I believe you put that there, correct?
Yes.
And kind of for the same reasons, to show these conditions persist from 2009 before the accident to this image in 2021.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And let's see. So
I'm giving the jury 101G. That was referenced at the time.
that would be the next one,
Okay.
which I haven't referenced, but if there's no objection, that's just the next bit of the slides.
No objection.
Okay.
What is that?
Could we see it though?
Can you move that? So
But just let us see it before you.
Sure.
Yeah, 3 are hard to find here. Okay, thank you.
is that 101F?
So this is 101F on the screen,
Excuse
and
me.
then what Steve has put here is 101G.
Correct.
Right.
Defense Exhibit 101G, is that also for demonstrative purposes?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Received for demonstrative purposes?
Okay, so Dr. Black, you've used various medical terminology that we might not all be familiar with, microvascular disease, for example. Can you give us a sense of what, in lay person's terms, what these sorts of findings are correlated with, how they impact a person?
Sure. The microvascular disease itself is a term that's used to describe micro, just meaning very small, and then vascular, the blood vessels, that when these blood vessels over time become diseased, which happens in a broad section of the population, in some people it's accelerated due to underlying high blood pressure or perhaps other diseases of the blood vessels, then you start to see scarring initially around the ventricles. These are unlike large strokes that may affect the cortex of the brain. These are smaller areas where the blood vessels are compromised, and it results in scarring of the tissue around the ventricles, and that's why we call it white matter disease. The other imaging in 2009 from the Veterans Administration, the CT angio, specifically looked at the larger blood vessels that supplied Mr. Sanderson's brain. And in those images, they found plaque or hardening of the arteries in the carotid bifurcation on his right side, and then also in the larger blood vessels inside of his brain near where his retinal arteries come off, or the cavernous carotid arteries. And those also show plaque or atherosclerosis.
Okay, is it too reductive to say that these findings are an indication of an aging brain?
Well, aging can result in this because we're all deteriorating to some degree or other every day we live.
Right.
But because
There's a
have
note of
baseline,
optimism for my
we
Wednesday.
can, attribute certain
We're all
findings
deteriorating legal
to happening
bites.
at an accelerated level.
We also
at
heard
some
yesterday that
stage,
we start
and that
losing
might indicate there's
losing our
medical problems.
what is it?
It's
The
one-
other
Our
thing
brain resolve. I
that
can't remember. At
It's
25.
is the-
Which sounds
consistent
impossible
largely
because my
ventricles,
understanding was that the
which
brain isn't
on
basically fully
all
mature until
images
25.
seem to be
So are you
disproportionate
trying to
or
tell
out
me
of
that the
proportion
moment
to
the brain
amount of
becomes fully mature is the
atrophy
moment it
of the
also
brain?
starts dying?
It's a peak.
That seems impossible.
In several reports, there was a suggestion
Also, I'm
of the
42.
diagnosis of
This
normal pressure
sucks.
hydrocephalus. And in fact, if you go to the image,
I'm still as sharp as I was at 25. Screw you.
that maybe the 2021. We don't have it on here. There's an image you showed that shows what's called transependymal edema. And that's fluid that leaks through the side of the ventricle due to pressure buildup in the ventricle. And that's a supporting finding from an imaging perspective of normal pressure hydrocephalus. Obviously, that has to be correlated to someone's clinical presentation and symptoms. And that's where a neurologist would play an important role in that.
I see. And I think the jury has heard about this term multiple times, but let's spend just a moment from your perspective defining what normal pressure hydrocephalus is.
Normal pressure hydrocephalus is basically an imbalance of the way fluid's managed within the ventricular system of the brain. And it can result in confusion or unsteadiness of gait when it's clinically applicable. But from an imaging perspective, that diagnosis is suggested when the ventricles seem to be disproportionately enlarged relative to the brain volume itself.
So from an imaging perspective, there was strong indication that Mr. Sanderson had normal pressure hydrocephalus.
It was suggested in every brain study he's had since 2009.
And is it a progressive condition? In other words, does it get worse with time?
Yes, it can.
And then I'm going to go to another image another report, a document that the jury has already seen. This one we looked at with Dr. Gibby. This is his report from March 3rd, 2021. Do you remember seeing this?
Yes, I reviewed this.
Okay. I believe it's also part of Gibby's packet in Plaintiff's Exhibit 31. What I want to point out, I think I called this out with Dr. Gibby. I want you to comment on it. There's a part of this report that says, I don't see any sign of shearing injury. Do you see that?
I see his report, yes.
And do you agree with that?
I agree with this report, yes.
Okay. And what do you understand Dr. Gibby's opinions to be as shearing injury is concerned?
So this report was performed on March 3rd, 2021, specifically looking for evidence of brain trauma. So that was the clinical history provided to Dr. Gibby, and he was looking in detail for any imaging findings that would support closed head injury.
And was shearing injury one of those?
Yeah, the things that Dr. Gibby would have been looking for, or that any of us would look for when we're evaluating a study in a patient with brain injury, would be shearing of the white matter tracts. These are very delicate tracts where if there's a rapid deceleration of the brain, those can shear. When they do shear, they deposit little microhemorrhages that leave blood products in the brain, specifically iron that's found in hemoglobin. So in another sequence, Dr. Gibby would have been looking for any evidence of iron deposition, which he mentions here, pathologic iron deposition. And then the other thing you would look for is bruising of the cortex of the brain. The brain does move to some degree with inside the skull because of it's bathed in cerebrospinal fluid. So if there's a rapid deceleration, the brain cortex can hit up against the skull and cause a bruise. In some cases, it can result in hemorrhage, but in other cases, it can result in focal atrophy at those locations. So in this case, none of the imaging showed a contusion, no shear injury, and no evidence of pathologic hemorrhage in the brain.
What would you expect
That's interesting.
to see in a person's imaging after some kind of traumatic brain injury?
Well, it depends on the severity, of course.
Is that the
Right?
same thing as a
Mild
concussion?
trauma,
If your brain
nothing.
hits your
Okay.
head,
Rapidly.
isn't that
And
Yeah, that's
what would
basically that's
what
what
would you
causes a
how would you
concussion
describe Dr.
is
Yeah.
the
Gibby's
rapid deceleration,
opinions
your
about the
brain
evidence of
rattling in
trauma
your
his,
skull and hitting your skull.
so no evidence of a concussion, basically? Okay.
In Dr. Gibby's report, where he specifically was looking for evidence of trauma, he emphatically states there is no evidence of post-traumatic brain injury in his report. Now, it is interesting because it contradicts to some degree his description in his deposition.
and how does it contradict that?
Well, Dr. Gibby mentions that in his deposition that the white matter disease that we've reviewed is very typical of shear injury or pathologic brain injury. But yet in his own report of the imaging which was performed at his center, which is identical to the findings in 2017 where he was offering that opinion in his deposition, he emphatically states that there is no evidence of post-traumatic brain injury.
Objection. The state's prior testimony. Overruled. The jury will have to recall the testimony.
Dr. Black, do you see on this report any indication that this image
This
was
was-
compared to prior
The judge
images?
just signaled to the jury, like, no, he just
No,
stated it
the-
correctly.
Is that common to do when you do a report, you compare it to prior images?
There were 3 imaging studies done after the accident. One was a CT scan done again at the Veterans Administration in 2016, which was compared to 2009. The imaging that was performed in 2017 and 2021 make no reference of comparison dating back to 2009. So I presume those images were not available to them.
Is that a problem? Does that lead to any limitations of a study if you don't look back at the prior studies?
It does limit the way that a neurologist can interpret an image. If you have prior imaging, it helps put things into context and can narrow the differential or the possibilities in terms of a diagnosis. For example, in this case, knowing that the white matter disease pre-existed in 2009 is helpful to exclude that it's a result of shear injury from an accident in 2016. So yes, comparison imaging when it's available is of extreme importance.
So are you critical of Dr. Gibby for not doing that comparison?
Not necessarily critical. Those images just may not have been available to him. I think if you offer an opinion as to causality and you do have imaging that's available from the Veterans Administration and someone draws a conclusion without baseline imaging taken into account, that can alter someone's conclusion and lead to an error in how they're discussing why that abnormality exists.
And do you believe that sort of error occurred here with Dr. Gibby's opinion?
I do. I think he was limited by the unavailability or lack of comparison to the imaging that was done in 2009. Yes.
Okay, I want to move to another report. This is for that 2017 image we started with, the one with the green arrows that was taken at Dr. Fong's clinic. It's in Plaintiff's Exhibit.
I like how they're
33,
starting
page
today.
8.
They're off to a
know that
really
we've
good start
shown
today.
it, so
for our presentation
They are.
of
move to
evidence.
admit it.
Of course, because they're starting with Clark Kent.
It's
Yeah, who was by
it's
far and away
exhibit
the best of the
33, page 8. And I guess
I would
8
agree with that statement.
pages. Just the report.
Just the imaging or
In a couple of years, he could be really good.
Exhibit 33, Fong's packet, pages 8 and 9.
All of us are.
Oh, we did
we're
already admit. Okay, great. I just know we didn't admit some of it.
Is 33 received?
That was
33 was not received.
Caucus.
Yep.
Seems like no objection. May I publish it to the jury, Your Honor?
No objection. Plaintiff's exhibit 33, page 8 is received.
And James, do you want it from start to end, or was there just one?
No, just
portion?
2 pages, page 8 and page 9.
Page 8 and page 9 are received.
Yeah, this is, again, the report connected to the image that we looked at first, taken at Dr. Fong's clinic in 2017. Is that correct, Dr. Black?
That's correct.
And I want to point to, I guess we should first ask the question we were just asking about, Dr. Gibby. Do you see any comparison here?
No.
Okay, so the same point.
So it's a very effective way of neutralizing the other expert. The other expert simply didn't have as much information.
Correct.
Yep.
And
So he drew
call out
conclusions based on the
bottom
information he
part
had. It
that's
was just an
called
incomplete picture.
impressions,
Yep.
I'd like for you to
I think that's a
comment
pretty good
on
answer.
whether you agree.
That's a great way.
I
That's a
do
great way
agree
to
with
do
these
it.
impressions.
I'll be interested to see if
Will you
he
take
comes
us
back
through
on
them
rebuttal.
in layperson's terminology. Maybe we could start. We covered some parts of the ventricles. You feel like you've explained that.
Well, I think we can. Let me just emphasize one other
Sure.
aspect of
Go ahead.
the ventricles. Also, I think it's important to note that the context of this study being acquired was specifically with the intent to look for any evidence of closed head injury or significant brain trauma. And so there are pertinent negatives that are pointed out by the radiologist who interpreted this exam that did not exist, like hemorrhage in the brain or evidence of a contusion. So there are pertinent negatives, even with the strong bias of looking for those because of the history.
So just to make sure I'm understanding you, that when you talk about bias, you're just saying going into this image, they heard a history of traumatic brain injury, concussion. So they're apprised of the possibility of various findings that might be associated with that, and they want to find them. They're looking for them.
Correct. That's correct.
Foundation sustained for leading.
So,
I mean, yeah, he literally just fed him the answer.
maybe just comment on bias again, because that term is used in various ways. What do you mean when you talk about bias?
That's
When
so
I'm
correct.
referring to
There
bias,
you go.
I'm talking professionally. When we interpret an exam, the clinical context of that exam or why that exam is being obtained is important to us. If somebody has an infection or if somebody has a brain tumor, then we understand that and we're looking for various findings that would support that. In this case, if somebody has known trauma, then that would alert the radiologist to look for certain findings. So in the case of the MRI performed in 2017 and the one performed in 2021, there would be an alert to look for findings related to trauma. So the negatives, the pertinent negatives in the exam from 2017, just like the one that was performed in 2021, would rule out imaging evidence of significant head trauma.
Yeah. So in other words, they're looking for trauma, but they did not find it. Is that
Yes.
right? Okay. So let's go to these findings again here in number 2. There's normal pressure hydrocephalus. We've talked about that, but there are a couple other things: normal aging brain, Alzheimer's dementia, subcortical arteriosclerotic encephalopathy, multi-infarct dementia. Did I read all that correctly?
You did.
And those are some big words. Can you comment on those to help the jury understand what these are doing in this report?
Well,
It's a lot of big words
some
there,
of these
sir.
are clinical descriptors, which would require a neurologist to make a correlation by examining that patient, because imaging can show a lot of things that don't necessarily manifest in someone clinically. So it's important to always take it into clinical context. The one description here that actually reflects underlying pathology would be the arteriosclerotic encephalopathy. That's just a big word for diseases of the blood vessels, specifically plaque or hardening of the arteries. The comprehensive workup that was done at the Veterans Administration in 2009 did show evidence of vascular disease at that time in the carotid arteries in the neck and also in the brain. And at that time, the white matter disease, which again was present over a decade later, was attributed to vascular disease.
Did you see any evidence in the imaging that correlates with vision problems?
No.
Um,
There was mention of it with the functional MRI, but that is beyond my expertise.
okay, you'd leave that to a neurologist to speak to, somebody else.
Somebody has who expertise in functional
Yeah.
imaging.
Okay.
Functional aging.
Okay, so
Why does that sound like a
this down, I
euphemism?
think.
Functional what?
Functional aging. It's like a
you-
euphemism.
Note anything
That sounds
in
like
the
a euphemism a
well,
little bit.
let me ask first. Are you aware that Dr. Gibby actually met with Mr. Sanderson?
I'm aware of that.
And is there anything about that meeting that has any bearing on your opinions today?
The only bearing it would have is that Dr. Gibby
Next thing they're going to tell me is I'm not immortal.
his report that he had told Mr. Sanderson that it's possible you could go through all of this workup and not find any evidence of post-traumatic brain injury.
And why would that be significant to you?
Simply because obviously the intent of that workup was to specifically look for evidence of brain injury.
I believe the jury's heard.
All right, I need to
Dr.
head out
Gibby,
for now, but I might be back later.
Okay.
give an
Sure.
opinion
Thanks for
Talk to you
coming to hang out.
I want to see
Talk
if
to you
you
soon.
Yeah.
remember and what your comment might be, your response to it might be. If the images prior to the accident are similar to the post-accident imaging, if, in other words, if the imaging prior showed things that were post-accident, would that mean that you cannot say the prior findings were caused by the accident?
Objection leading misstates prior testimony.
As to leading, sustained.
Okay, so do you recall Dr. Gibby giving an opinion that if the pre-accident findings the post-accident findings are found in the pre-accident imaging, that you could not say that the post-accident imaging was caused by the accident?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
Okay. What do you recall Dr. Gibby saying about the relationship between the pre-accident
There you go.
imaging and the post-accident imaging?
My opinion on that would be based on his deposition. If you'd like, I can read 2 areas of his deposition that I think answer your question.
Sure, go ahead.
So
Objection hearsay.
Sustained.
Okay, so let's just ask you this question. Do you have any opinions about whether the post-accident imaging findings can be attributed to, from an imaging perspective, the collision, the ski collision?
Objection leading.
Overruled.
we ask that again.
Yes. Do you have any opinions about whether the post-accident imaging findings can be attributed to the collision?
Yes,
What is that opinion?
that those findings predate the accident and date back to at least 2009, as confirmed by a comprehensive imaging workup of Mr. Sanderson's brain performed at the Veterans Administration Hospital.
And so do you believe those post-accident, I apologize that I keep messing this up. You believe that those post-accident imaging findings are in any way related to the collision?
No,
And what was the reason for that 2009 workup, to your knowledge?
unfortunately, Mr. Sanderson had suffered a retinal artery occlusion, a central retinal artery occlusion that resulted in blindness in one eye. And so he was undergoing a workup for risk factors that would relate to that.
Okay. And do you know any of the people that have done any of his imaging?
I'm familiar with them, yes.
Yeah, and so that 2009 workup, or do you know the people that did that workup?
Yes.
And do you trust the findings that they came to?
Yeah, they're very experienced and well trained, yes.
Okay, great. That's all the questions I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Egan.
Andy, that's who he reminds me of. I was trying to think. People have been referring to him as Clark Kent this whole time, and I agree with that. But I was like, he still reminds me of like someone, but he totally looks like Ben.
At the end.
He does.
You're not an eye doctor, are you?
I'm not.
And you said the imaging from the retinal artery occlusion means blindness in the eye. Does that mean total blindness? Or?
That's beyond my expertise, and I'm not familiar enough with his clinical condition to comment on that.
So your term blindness is probably a little broad.
Broad. I only gained that from the histories that were provided with his imaging studies.
Okay, so he may still have some vision in his eye, even though.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I just wanted to point that out.
All right, so he might not be totally blind in his right eye. There still has been testimony that's come out at trial, though, that suggests that he's had difficulty seeing things on his right side.
Let's see. Is it true you were a partner of Dr. Wendell Gibby's?
Yes.
And how long ago was that?
It's been probably over 10 years.
Okay. And
Whoa, that's weird. Did he ask if he is or if
so
he
you know
was?
his work, correct?
Correct.
And you're not critical of his work in general, are you?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Why would you ask that? I feel
You
like
never
that's
conducted an exam of the client, Terry Sanderson.
No.
You understand there was a sudden change after the ski crash in Terry Sanderson's condition, brain health.
From my review of the records, that's my understanding.
You understand that through, you read before and after witnesses who confirmed there was a sudden change after the collision, correct?
Do you mind asking that again?
Did you read before and after witness testimony? You
No.
didn't. So you didn't read. Isn't before and after witness testimony important to understanding someone's brain injury?
I think it's very important, but it was beyond the scope of what I was to do. I concentrated only on his imaging.
Okay. So you didn't have the before and after information that would improve the diagnosis that you might, or the opinions you might give today in court to this jury.
I understood that with respect to the imaging, we were looking for evidence of brain trauma as would manifest on imaging. And so that's where I concentrated my focus.
Well, you said that MTBI may not be shown on an MRI. True?
A mild brain injury?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. So Dr. Sanderson could have a brain injury, mild traumatic brain injury, and it not be shown up on imaging, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now the 2009 imaging, it was asymptomatic, true?
Again, I don't understand. I'm not the clinician who examined him at that time, and I can only look at his imaging in the context of the information. So I don't feel qualified to answer your question.
Thank you.
Ilis Sextina. We'll talk about it in the next break when it comes up. So I'm
from
going
the
to save
imaging
this just so you know, I'm not ignoring it.
2017, 2021, there's no change, right?
Very little change.
Okay. Dr. Black, no one's given a diagnosis that Terry Sanderson has clinical NPH or normal pressure hydrocephalus, true?
I don't know that for sure.
Okay. So the NPH was not clinically diagnosed by his VA doctors, as far as you know, correct?
As far as I know, it was only suggested, well, it was suggested in most of his imaging studies, but I don't know what clinical correlation was made.
Okay, and so clinical correlation means that there was some specialist at the VA or elsewhere that understood his NPH was showing symptoms, correct?
That's correct.
So you don't need pathological evidence of to have a MTBI, correct?
When you say pathological, are you saying imaging evidence?
Yes.
That's correct.
So, Dr. Black, imaging can show a lot that that hasn't really manifested or shown up, correct?
And will you state that one more time?
Okay, imaging can show a lot of things that hasn't shown up in a clinical setting. No,
Yes, correct.
so Terry could have these problems that show up on imaging, but there's no symptoms that would affect him from or stop him from skiing, for instance.
It's possible, yes.
Okay.
Pacing of this lawyer is hard to follow sometimes. That all that dead air in
And in
between.
general, you would prefer to have an actual exam of the patient to render your opinions true?
I think that imaging correlated with a clinical exam is the correct way to assess a patient's condition.
So you would prefer to have an exam, correct?
Yes. Well, I prefer, I think they correlate.
Okay.
The information's valuable in both circumstances, but optimally in decision making, you want both types of information.
And so your opinions are not as strong as they would be without this exam, right?
Without a clinical exam?
Yeah.
There's my opinions are certainly limited to his imaging.
I'm going to answer this in a sec, Grant.
Thank you.
You bet.
Okay. Well,
Thank you, Mr. Bueller. Mr. Egan?
Ella Sextina, what came from the motion for directive verdict? I don't
Dr.
know
Black,
if they've
you
had it
asked
yet because they
about
just
before and
rested.
after witnesses,
Hey, Eric, how's it going?
family members.
Hey, how you
people
doing?
Close to Mr. Sanderson.
Doing well.
Before and after the
You're
accident.
I'm
on
not sure I understand that
the
question.
redirect
but
of the
Okay, well, my
one
my
of the
question is
expert
just
witnesses for Gwyneth
whether
Paltrow right now.
Oh,
opinions
okay.
from
You're gonna have to-
such
I have
witnesses
watched
would affect
this much of
your
this.
read of objective findings.
I know nothing.
No, they would not.
And what
Feel
about
free to ask questions
you
because I'm
actually
sure there's
met
people
with
in the
Mr.
chat too that
Sanderson?
have been
Would
just
that
popping in for a little
change
bit.
The objective findings in the image.
I probably make people
No,
crazy
because I
though
would
because I
defer
know
to
so
a
little. So I'm
neurologist
kind of like,
or
let me get
neuropsychologist.
acclimated before I go ask
Fair.
dumb
That
things.
kind of expertise to evaluate Mr. Sanderson. My area of expertise is in brain imaging.
Do you typically evaluate patients when you read their imaging?
With regard to brain imaging, no.
And then after
Is this
See,
about the injuries?
I
that
guess
occurred?
we did show one of these boards, but you didn't get to see it. I want to make sure you see it so the jury knows that you've seen
Okay.
it. And I'll show you.
Stephanie Paw, thank you so much for that.
101G.
I'll answer this in a bit.
And these are the same. Are these the same images we were looking at on the screen?
Yes.
And they show that before there was a finding that was also after the collision. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so I think the jury's already seen this. And then we also have two more boards, which we didn't show. Your Honor, I move to admit 101H and 101I for demonstrative purposes.
No objection. Defense Exhibit 101H and 101I, or is this plaintiff's exhibits?
These are ours, yes.
Defense exhibits are received for demonstrative purposes.
So I'll show you first, Dr. Black. Is this the same idea as the board we just saw?
Yes.
Okay, just with different findings.
Yes.
Okay, and then that was 101H. And this is-
Objection beyond the scope. Overruled.
and then this is 101I. And it's the
Yes.
same idea.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just show the jury 101H, 101I. And then my last question for you, Dr. Black, is whether after questioning from Mr. Bueller, you have your opinions about these objective findings you've been discussing on the
Bueller?
imaging changed.
They have not.
Okay, thank you.
And he sounds like the teacher.
You said you preferred to have objective findings from a neurologist or neuropsychologist, correct?
For clinical correlation, absolutely.
Yeah, for clinical correlation. Would you defer to someone like Dr. Goldstein?
I mean, I don't know him, so that name doesn't mean anything to me.
He's a neuropsychologist who testified in this trial. You didn't know that?
No.
So Dr. Goldstein provided clinical correlation, and that would help your opinions if you had that, true?
Sure. If somebody has expertise clinically that I don't have, but it doesn't change how I interpret the images or my view of these findings.
So your opinions are limited to your view of the images and not the clinical findings, true?
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Egan,
That's all you're on.
you may be excused. Thank you.
Okay. So TLDR of this witness is
Call our next witness or take a brief break.
Is this witness going to take a bit?
Robert Hesh,
Hesh.
sorry. And
okay. You could just
I
say
would
his name
think,
completely wrong.
I could be on and off in a half hour, I think.
Okay. Why don't we go ahead and take a break
Take a break.
because there will be cross-examination, I'm sure. We'll take a recess now.
Okay. So this last witness basically, so Eric, we've got the two major fights here are like who hit whom, and then does Terry Sanderson have the injuries that he says that he does, / are those injuries just a natural progression of the pre-existing conditions he had before the accident, or were they exacerbated by the ski accident? So because if they were exacerbated, then am I still super loud?
Yeah, I don't know.
If I
Your
am.
mic is really, really hot.
Okay.
So
Let me
he
turn-
had injuries before this? That's odd.
He did. So I'm turning myself down here.
And
Hopefully
I'm
that
trying
works.
to be
Is
less
that-
red. I look like
Hold
I'm coming off of Mars. I don't know what's up with my camera, but cool. Weird.
Nice. So yeah, he had all kinds of pre-existing conditions, including he had normal pressure hydrocephalus. And he also had microvascular ischemic white matter disease. I'm amazed that I remembered that name.
What is that?
Which basically, so it's basically where if I understand it correctly, it's where your brain your vesicles in your brain start to either constrict or they start to build up fluid around them. But I think it's because of a constriction or a plaque buildup in your brain. And so you start to develop the scarring around the ventricles in your brain, which is why they call it white matter tissue. So, and any folks that are, I know we've got a lot of people that have like medical backgrounds in the chat, folks that have been nurses and that kind of stuff. So you can correct me if I'm wrong on any of that. But yeah, so he had these issues, and the NPH, I think there's three main symptoms that can show. Is number one, it can be I think memory loss. Number two, loss of balance, and number three, like incontinence, which isn't really related to anything here. It's like whether or not you can like control going to the bathroom. But
I'm way off on this. So this is stemming out of a ski collision, like two skiers hitting each other. So the balance is a giant problem for him, right? If he's like a drunken skier, and I'm not trying to be mean, but if he is controlling things right, then are they using that as a counter to a causality or something?
That is, so the defense, which is Gwyneth Paltrow's the defense, they're pointing to that as that may be a possibility for, you know, how something like this could have happened. Number two is another one of his pre-existing conditions. He has a handful of them. Another one is he had essentially, well, it's a blood clot in his eye. So they've been calling it like a stroke in his eye, his right eye, which means that he is at least somewhat blind in his right eye, meaning he's even other witnesses have testified, like family members and stuff like that have testified affirmatively that there have been times when they've been like out on walks with him and he's asked them to move like from a portion of his right side so that he could actually see them.
When did the accident happen?
2016.
7 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah. And yeah, Janny Wall. So the stroke in the eye, the plaintiff side, they're calling that an ocular occlusion. I think ocular, but an occlusion. So I guess that's, you know, like when you have a blood clot in your lung, it's you know, an embolism, or in other parts of your body, it's an embolism. You know, I guess apparently a blood clot in your eye is called an occlusion. I didn't know that until this trial.
But because I don't want to be picking on him, 7 years ago, were these conditions 7 years ago, or is this problems that people are describing now? Because anything happened between then and now. 7 years is a long time.
Yeah. What they're using are brain scans so the accident happened in 2016. He had a brain scan in 2017 that showed a number of these things, but before the accident, so remember 2016 is when the collision happened. 2009, there's an MRI scan that shows the NPH and the microvascular white matter disease and like all of that stuff, and it's like it looks pretty parallel. And by the way, these brain diseases are apparently degenerative over time. So there is a decent question here of like, is this just a natural progression of what he went through? Like maybe he did get a concussion and it, you know, the symptoms went away, but he just has this other stuff that would have ended up in this place anyway, regardless. Or did the collision exacerbate the diseases that he already had and that he had these vulnerabilities and just kind of hit him in the wrong place? Because if that's the case, then that's where the plaintiff side is arguing the eggshell skull plaintiff concept, you know, where it's like you take your victim as they come. If they're particularly vulnerable because they have some kind of you know, weaknesses or diseases or what have you, then you're still responsible if in fact the jury finds that you're liable. But even on liability, like even on you know, whether or not Gwyneth Paltrow breached her duty of reasonable care on the mountain, that's still a very big question, I think, that I don't think the plaintiff side has proven at this point.
Well, I don't know that part, but you know, I'm like, if he is that much of a mess, how the hell is he skiing? I'd like to think I'm healthy and I won't get on skis.
Yeah, that's been a common refrain in a lot of places. Like folks in the chat have said that too, and I definitely understand that too. I I think that sometimes when you have been doing something for so many years, you get overconfident about your abilities, and then sometimes it's harder for people to come to terms with the fact that their body might not be doing things that they used to be able to do very well. And so because you've been doing it for so long, it's like, well, what's the difference? I don't
Now,
know.
what about what was this about I forgot how you phrased it, but her responsibility for care or something. What is that claim?
Yeah. So this is all a negligence claim here. So it's the liability question is whether or not Gwyneth Paltrow has breached her duty of reasonable care. Like, you know, she's got to be careful on the hill, looking where she's going, you know, not coming right up behind people, you know, that kind of stuff. So did she do something wrong on the mountain? And I guess we are coming back, but we can.
We're ready for the jury.
The jury's going to be coming back.
Why don't you let them know whenever they're done?
But
They're still cycling through, I think.
Your Honor, could we wait a few minutes for the warrants to be back?
Yes. So maybe just have them hold at the door.
okay.
Sure. Yeah, they're still doing a few things, Mr. Sykes.
I love reading subtitles. Mistress.
I know. So okay, so we can pull that off then. So the evidence for whether or not she breached her duty of reasonable care is very thin. There's no video evidence. There was a suggestion that there was a GoPro video at one point that has gone missing, or the defense or the plaintiff side.
Why don't you take a seat out in the gallery?
They've actually done a pretty good job, the plaintiff side, of establishing that was just like kind of a mix up, but it's entirely dependent on whether or not you believe the justification given by the person that said GoPro in an email. But there's one eyewitness who says that he saw it, but he was 40 feet away, also skiing at the time, and he is colorblind and admits that he couldn't tell you the difference between Gwyneth Paltrow's ski outfit and Terry Sanderson's ski outfit, and when they collided, they looked like one person.
Okay, I was going to say I'm partially colorblind, so I was going to be careful on that one because my visual acuity is stronger in some regards because of the color blindness. Believe it or not, snipers
it's
are
just
picked,
because.
but yeah.
Oh, really? Snipers are often.
Well, because you can't fool them with camouflage. Colorblind people, because think about it, camouflage is color and pattern. Somebody who's colorblind, the pattern's kind of irrelevant. Now, I'm not completely colorblind, but I have been through encounters to where I could spot people. Not anymore. I've got glasses, but back in the Army, at a great distance, literally a minute or two before everybody else could see them coming.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Robert,
yeah, the only reason why I bring up the colorblindness thing is because he himself said on cross-examination, I couldn't tell you the difference. Like they look like one person when they collided.
Come right up here to the clerk,
and it was like a 1-2 second thing that he saw after he said he was alerted by her screaming.
You're about to give in the case now before the court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God. Thank you.
Good morning. If you could start by stating your full name and spell it out for us.
My name is Robert Hesh, ROBERT HOESCH.
HOESCH.
Doctor, nice to see you. What city do you live in?
Salt Lake.
I'm going to take this off. I do have a cold, but.
Okay. When he misstated his name earlier,
what's your current position?
I thought it was because he was unfamiliar and wasn't going to be the one directing him. But now I'm annoyed that he misstated his name before.
In Utah and Idaho.
Does that mean you're the top MD for all of Intermountain Healthcare?
In Utah and Idaho.
Okay. You're pretty young, aren't you? How old are you?
48.
When I hired you on this case, you didn't have such a prestigious title, did you?
No, I did not.
What were you?
I was a neurologist at Intermountain Medical Center and the leader of our neurosciences program at Intermountain.
Good for you. to be clear, you are not here on behalf of Intermountain Healthcare. Is that right?
Correct. My opinions are my own.
Thank you. All right. Just undergrad, where was that briefly?
Undergrad, University of Maryland, College Park.
In what subject?
Cell and molecular biology and genetics.
Defense witness
nerd.
or plaintiff?
I am a neurologist.
Defense witness.
Okay.
Kidding. Poli-sci is the nerd thing. All right, good for you. And then your MD degree was where?
University of Maryland in Baltimore.
And what did you choose to specialize in?
Neurology.
Okay, and how many years? So 4 years undergrad, 4 years med school, then how many more years?
Well, then I did a PhD for 4 years as well in that time, and then went across town to Hopkins for my neurology residency. So that was another 4 years.
What a nerd. All right.
Okay,
4
months
years
is enough.
in postdoc.
He's trying to make him
What's that?
relatable, but
In-
he's kind of being a dick.
Neurology.
Okay.
And then 2 more years as
The
a
problem is
fellowship
he got a
in
laugh the first
critical
time, so he
care.
thinks he can
But
do it
did
again.
you say
and
there
he'll
were
get a
years
laugh.
after undergrad before med school?
No, it was during med school. I did my PhD.
Okay. Not all MDs do PhDs too?
Correct.
Okay. That's a lot of training. Fellowship was in what specifically?
Neurocritical care.
All right. So
Is this lawyer
neuro
always like this?
critical
Yes.
care.
Oh,
Yes,
This is
the
like
entire
when
time. He's
people
very
hit
unlikable.
their head and they're in big trouble,
That's
yeah.
correct.
or they get a stroke. They're in big trouble.
That's right.
They call you in, and sometimes you think you're gonna go swimming for fun, and you just get called in for like 14 hours straight
That's right.
to work on one patient.
Right.
All right, married, kids.
Yes.
Objection relevance? What does that have to do with anything?
Have you reviewed some
Fair.
materials in this case?
I have.
Would
All
you
right, so
object though?
The jury just heard from a
I don't know. Maybe.
It would seem like interrupting
neuroradiologist.
no relevance. So
You are a neurologist. Okay. Distinguish the two again really quick.
So a neuroradiologist reads images, MRIs, CTs, X-rays, all kinds of images of the brain and the spinal cord.
Okay. And you neurologists do what?
We diagnose and treat conditions of the nervous system. So brain, spinal cord, peripheral nerves.
And then this afternoon, we're going to hear from a neuropsychologist. What's that?
The neuropsychologist diagnoses and treats disorders of consciousness and awareness and language that are related to neurological conditions.
And do the three of you work together on hard cases?
Yes.
And do you rely, for instance, upon a neuroradiologist and a neuropsychologist all the time?
Yes.
Okay. You know, I was kidding when I said nerd. Really, I'm praising you in a backward way. I apologize if that's.
He's got to be the most clever guy in the room, doesn't he?
That's okay.
Oh, of course.
All right. You were here for Dr. Black's testimony on the neuroradiology. Is that true?
Yes.
And one of his opinions was that Mr. Sanderson's brain problems that he complains of as a result of the collision were actually all pre-existing. Did you hear Dr. Black say that?
Yes, I did.
And do you agree with that opinion?
Yes, I do.
Let's talk about what you've reviewed. So I think yesterday you told me you had received some 3,000 pages of junk. Just kidding. Materials, right?
Dude, this
Wow.
is not
Correct.
comedy hour.
And a
Let's
big
get to
chunk
it.
of those were medical records, and a big
I
chunk
agree
of those
with
were
Love
depositions.
Claire in the
Correct.
chat.
And then you also received a lot of images.
I would think this was crossed just
before and
walking in.
after.
That's correct.
And
Yeah.
did you review all of that?
Yes, over several years.
Do you believe you have foundation to render the opinions you're about to render in this case?
Yes, I do.
in addition to what you've reviewed, your background, education, training, and experience, do you believe that all comes to bear in rendering the opinions you're about to give?
Yes.
There's been so many like weird things happening in this trial. People making jokes when they
Your
shouldn't.
Honor,
all kinds of stuff.
I think this will be most efficient. He's prepared a written report that has some headings, and I would like to just go to the and have James bring up.
The jury
just
can't
the
be
heading.
impressed with this lawyer, though. I mean, he's terrible.
Well, it just hasn't been
He's-
admitted into evidence. I think he can just read.
Fortunate enough to have opposing counsel also not be great though.
I think, are we talking about a
Sure.
demonstrative?
So it's a
exhibit to
presidential
illustrate
election.
this
Oh,
witness's
sorry.
Testimony?
No, we're talking about just the headings of his report,
All right.
Reports are not admissible.
not admitting them.
Agreed, but I think it might be efficient to do it that way. It's no different than the witness walking up to a chalkboard and writing the words out on a board. So I'm fine with it. If you just show the headings.
Thank you. So, did you prepare a written report, by the way?
Yes, and I have it with me.
And it's broken down into some headings,
Yes.
and I thought this would be helpful. Can you read heading number 1?
The persisting neurological symptoms Mr. Sanderson reports since the February 2016 ski accident are likely attributable to pre-existing health conditions.
Okay. Is that indeed your opinion?
Yes.
And on what is it based?
So based on my review of the records, his mental health professionals that evaluated him before and after, if you look at the trajectory of those evaluations, it looks essentially the same before and after. Also based on review of the imaging, and afterwards the neuropsychology testing that was normal or above normal compared to population.
Okay, let's hit all of them, and then we'll go back if needed. Are you able to bring up 2? Well, he brings up number 2. Comment upon the patient's pre-existing injuries. Which ones did you find particularly important?
The pre-existing condition of depression and anxiety is the most salient
Okay.
pre-existing condition.
And how is it that his pre-existing depression and anxiety is related to his complaints of post-collision symptoms?
So the depression and anxiety can cause all of the symptoms that he is complaining of post-collision. And if you look at the records and you were able to remove the collision, just so just make it evaporate, the history reads coherently. This is a man in his 70s with depression and anxiety, and it's gotten bad enough to the point that it's impairing memory and concentration and other activities that he was used to doing.
So is another way of saying that if we removed the collision, he never had a collision that day, it still makes sense, his trajectory.
Right. If you read the medical records from before the injury through now, and you remove the injury, it doesn't change the trajectory of his complaints.
So
his
for
evaluation by his health professionals.
For instance, if we look at his medical record, let's say just 2 weeks before, 3 weeks before, did you know he went to the VA doctor that day?
Yeah.
With complaints of, I'm feeling really old, I can't do what I used to be able to do. That was pre-injury, correct?
Correct.
And then you compare it to his records even soon after the collision. You're saying it doesn't really show anything happened, correct?
Hasn't changed his course.
Okay. And whenever you're ready, James.
Good witness, bad lawyer.
Can you read your opinion number 2?
The only neurological problems, Mr.
Your
Sanders.
Honor, I object to reading a report to the jury. You can tell it, no problem with that, but you shouldn't be reading it.
We already dealt with this.
Yeah, overruled. I think I ruled on it.
Your Honor, I just want to flag for the jury just how much I
The only
dislike this one.
neurological problems Mr. Sanderson has had maybe partly The only neurological problems Mr. Sanderson has had that may be partly attributable to the ski accident are those associated with the mild concussion he experienced during the accident.
Okay, can you fill in the meat on those bones? Help us understand that a little.
Yes, so my opinion is if he had a concussion, it was very mild. More likely than not, I would say 95% or more that he would have made a full recovery from that concussion within a few weeks, not more than 99% within a few months based on the severity of the concussion. So
I think he's saying I'm in that like 1%. I'm not in the 95 and the 99%.
But he agreed there's a concussion.
How do you respond to that?
He said if there was a
So I would say if, as a neurologist, I have patients that come in, they complain of cognitive symptoms, memory loss, attention problems, difficulty doing things that they used to do. And they can have depression and anxiety. They may have early signs of dementia. Those things are far more common for someone in Mr. Sanderson's category. Man in their 70s, they don't feel the way that they used to feel like they're getting old, like he said before the accident or after the accident, concerned that they may be getting Alzheimer's disease. So I think those things are far more likely than a very minor concussion causing symptoms 7 years later.
Do you see hundreds of those patients a year who've never had a ski collision?
Correct.
Okay, any other
Time for
comment
meetings?
on your opinion
That's fine.
number 2 that you would like to make?
No, I think that concludes it.
Thank you. James is going to bring up number 3.
This witness is smarter than the lawyer too, in every way. I mean, the lawyer's trying to spike the football, and it's like just kind of he had a mic drop in there. It's like, leave it.
That's been the case quite a bit in this trial.
And do you have it there?
I do. Should I just read it?
Start reading it. There you go.
The neurological problems associated with the mild concussion Mr. Sanderson may have experienced resolved within months. They were not permanent as plaintiff's experts claim.
Okay, mild concussion. You weren't here, but did you hear Dr. Edgley testify or read his deposition?
I've read the deposition.
All right. So did he talk about, hey, a couple things we look at is length of...
Objection, this takes facts. There's no deposition.
Sustained.
Okay. Comment. I did misspeak. I forgot you didn't take his deposition.
Good objection.
Is there some importance in determining the severity of concussion in terms of how long they're unconscious? Is that a factor?
Yeah. Length of amnesia, length of loss of consciousness, or length of confusion.
All right. I think those were the same 3 he said. All right. What do you know about length of unconsciousness?
From my assessment, looking through the records, I don't think that there was loss of consciousness.
Okay. Even if there was some loss of consciousness, it would have been brief. Is that fair?
Seconds, yeah.
And let's see, in terms of, I think, to be fair, I think Mr. Ramon said he was spread eagle, head down, out cold, over 2 minutes. I just want to put that in the record. Not substantiated by any other witness, but did you at least observe that?
Okay, I was gonna say you got to ask a question
Yeah,
there.
you know,
Well, Your Honor, I object. He's not competent to assess someone's credibility. He wasn't there.
That's what I'm going
Testify
to.
about that.
Why don't you clarify your question?
Yeah.
Does that fit with your?
What do you know about that? Isn't that someone saying longer period of unconsciousness?
Your Honor, he can't comment on.
I'm actually trying to help the plaintiff. Go ahead.
Scotty.
Snarkiness.
The witness
He
is
can't help
asking
himself.
if you remember reading that.
I do.
Okay. Is the significant time to be unconscious, is that 5 minutes or over?
Yes.
All right. And then comment, you said period of amnesia. What do you understand on that? Length of amnesia. What do you understand?
The period of time that the person that has the injury is not able to remember either before or after the event.
All right. And are you acknowledging that Mr. Sanderson had a mild concussion?
It's more likely than not he did. He had headache.
Okay, there we
in
go.
one of the, I think it was the Instacare report, and so that would be consistent with a mild concussion.
And it resolved within months. What do you base that on?
I believe there was a report where he said it's getting better.
Okay, and they are not permanent, as plaintiffs claim. Please comment.
Correct. So the head injury was very mild. I mean, it fell in the most mild category of concussion, so kind of a grade 1. And the rest of the symptoms that he has, what could be caused by other conditions, which I would say are more common.
And do you believe that more likely than not, that is why he continues to have some symptoms?
Yes.
In other words, not because of the ski collision, but just because of his aging progressive brain.
Correct.
Let's read your fourth opinion. There are a total of 6, by the way. And the latter 2, we might just touch on briefly.
So the fourth opinion is that Mr. Sanderson does not currently need ongoing neurological treatment.
That's related to the ski collision.
That's related to the ski collision. So I have to modify that slightly because this report was written before the assessment by Dr. Goldstein was available to me.
Right. Goldstein, I think, recommended some care with regard to dementia.
Dr.
Did you hear that personally?
I didn't hear it personally, but I read it in his actual report from when he evaluated Mr. Sanderson.
Do you believe Mr. Sanderson to have sort of dementia symptoms?
Yes.
Your Honor, he's never evaluated him.
That's for cross-examination.
Medical evaluation.
It's a speaking objection.
No foundation.
Is it in the report?
Do you have symptoms? So he's commenting on his further needs, and he's commenting on Sam Goldstein.
There's nothing. in the
Why don't you
report-
ask a question,
Nothing in the
then we'll
report about
see.
the judge.
And that's
Go ahead
why
and
that's why
finish
we have
and ask the next
cross-examination.
question.
Okay, so you said Mr. Sanderson does not currently need ongoing neurologic treatment, true?
Correct. That's what the report says.
Okay, since you wrote this, did you then read Sam Goldstein's updated opinion?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor.
That would be Dr. Sam Goldstein, right?
Thank you.
Interesting. I wonder why he's not given a title.
Is there a drug that treats dementia?
Is that what?
Yes.
What is that called?
It's called
Your
Aricept.
Honor, I object. There's no opinion on dementia.
Sustained?
Thank you.
Well, you could say, have you seen this drug? Yes. What is it commonly used for?
Yeah.
Why is it your opinion that Mr. Sanderson does not currently need ongoing neurologic treatment related to the ski injury is the addition you made?
The ski injury caused a mild concussion, more likely than not, that was self-limited. And his ongoing symptoms are more likely due to ongoing pre-existing conditions and possibly new conditions.
Let's bring up, if we can, D106.
Has it been received?
I don't think so.
No, it has not.
D106.
Any objection?
Can I see it? Oh. This is for demonstrative purposes only. Sure. Okay. That means we can also write on it, can we not?
Why don't we address that if we need to
Okay,
later?
thank you. There's a
So-
lot missing.
Defendant's
You're,
Exhibit
you
106
can
is
comment
received.
during cross examination.
For demonstrative purposes.
The snark on both
Do
sides
you
is
have
so
it in
annoying in
front
this
of you?
trial.
May I approach it? I want to make sure you can see it. And James, if you can bring it up, that would be good.
Like it seems like these two attorneys like
Hate
do
each
not
other.
like each other.
Oh, I think you might see it right on your monitor.
Well, I can see why with this guy who's questioning. I mean, I've only watched him for a minute. I didn't like him within 20 seconds.
D106.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, I got it. You see it?
Don't know the other guy yet.
Have you had a chance to read this document?
Yes.
And do you agree with it?
Yes, I do.
It's entitled Mr. Sanderson's Brain Imaging Both Before and After Ski Collision. Did it show atrophy, loss of brain cell sign of aging brain before and after?
Yes.
Did his images, I actually have a roaming microphone, but maybe it needs to be higher up. Volume loss, diminishing brain size of the sign of aging brain. Did he have this before and after?
Your Honor, I object to this testimony. This witness is a neurologist, not a neuroradiologist. I don't think he's competent to comment on radiology readings.
I could establish foundation if you want.
Go ahead.
Do you look at images all the time, all day?
All day, every day.
So the neuroradiologist reads them, but do you just rely on their written report, or do you personally read them too?
I look at the films, then I confirm with their report, and then I bring it together with what we see clinically.
Shouldn't you be doing that
I
on
think
cross,
the
like you were
objection
saying
is somehow
earlier?
that you're not competent to talk about the imaging before versus after. Do you agree or disagree?
I disagree.
How so?
So I've looked at the images. These are pretty standard MRI images that we see every day, and a major part of my practice as an outpatient neurologist was evaluating patients for dementia and specifically NPH. Saw hundreds of patients with the question of whether they had NPH.
Which is that hydrocephalus?
It's the hydrocephalus at the bottom.
All right. So is it true that neuroradiologists essentially serve you? They don't personally talk to patients. You order the neuroradiologist to do a study, then it comes back to you, and you are the one who's face-to-face with the patient.
Correct. I translate the.
Just a second,
Well,
sir. I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Don't answer
Sustained as to leading.
Okay. Have I established sufficient foundation?
This does have the scientific, technical, or other specialized knowledge that'll help the jury, so you may proceed.
Judge,
Okay, we
please tell
talked
the
about
jury
atrophy
about
and
how great
volume
my
loss.
witness is
Enlarged
and
ventricles.
how qualified he is.
A ventricle is
Testimony?
what in the brain? Is that like at Halloween when we see a mold of a brain? It's the little gooey stuff going out. You tell
Oh my
me.
God.
Okay. I was
It's
totally
the
wrong.
inside the brain. There's fluid-filled sacs that contain spinal fluid. So
Okay.
that it's the black thing in the middle on the MRI that Dr. Black went through.
All right. And is that like the main blood feeding the brain? What are they?
No,
What purpose do the ventricles serve?
they buoy the brain, so it prevents the brain from having as much shock when we just move around in everyday life.
All right. Chronic microvascular disease, is that something he had before and after?
Yes, that was described by Dr. Black.
Is that associated with cognitive decline?
It can be.
And why does he have that? Is that from this stroke event years earlier, or just bad luck, or eating too many donuts, or what?
I think it's a combination of his high blood pressure and high cholesterol with a little bit of genetics that makes our blood vessels harder than average.
White matter disease, we've talked about that a little bit. It says they're damage to nerve fibers associated with memory, balance, and mobility issues. Did he have that before and after?
Yes.
And is that progressive in nature?
It didn't look that like unbelievably progressive. Looked stable over time.
And why did he have that? Was that associated with the stroke event?
No, I think it's probably associated with the chronic microvascular disease. The stroke event was in his eye.
No evidence of trauma before or after. Is that true?
That's correct.
Concern for disease due to excess fluid buildup. That's the NPH. Was that a concern before and a concern after?
Yes.
Does he in fact have that condition?
So that would be a condition that I would need further clinical evaluation to determine, but his MRI would be consistent with that condition.
You mentioned earlier that his conditions are not permanent, as plaintiff's experts claim. And I just want to comment, do you believe Dr. Fong to have used unreliable science to make some of her opinions?
Objection, leading.
Sustain his relevance.
You didn't give me the right objection,
If I
but
sustain
there is an
objection,
objection here, and I'll give it to you.
Thanks.
They're about to get up and criticize you for not seeing this patient. Why didn't you? Why wouldn't you? Why would it be necessary if you needed to?
Yeah, what I would always be willing, and actually didn't know that was an option. But in this case, and with many patients in my practice, we review tons of records before we see them. And actually, Mr. Sanderson probably had 10 times the amount of records that I have before I see my patients in clinic. You said 3,000 pages and lots of imaging. So I can know with 90% certainty going in based on the before and after imaging, the neuropsych testing over a period of years, his reports over time. I can know with 90% accuracy what's going on. So if I went in there, I'd be trying to figure out, does he have NPH or not? And what can I do to help him with his depression, anxiety, and other memory problems?
Would you be treating him or evaluating the ski injury?
No, I'd be providing counseling that the ski injury was not part of it.
Now, you refer people all the time to neuropsychologists. Is that true?
Yes.
And we're about to hear from two. But you did have the benefit of multiple neuropsychologist exams at the VA. Is that true?
Correct.
And do you know them to be good neuropsychologists?
I don't know them.
Okay. Do you know them to be not hired by either side, his normal treating providers?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Why is he still asking
these
questions?
were voluminous evaluations, were they not?
Yes.
And
He's setting him up to agree with the neuropsychs, saying that this is all
And
depression
what-
and anxiety.
what did they conclude?
They were essentially normal, and they showed that he was performing above average.
Now, is that above average for everyone on the street or for 75-year-old men with college educations or what?
For a 75-year-old man with college educations and
Okay,
with a high baseline.
So in some places, even like near superior
Correct.
levels.
Yes.
So I'm going to grab one thing.
He's leading away from the salient point, though. It was like forever ago that the guy said, hey, he had problems before, he has problems after, there's no relevance. That was the testimony, I thought. Why is he still talking?
Yeah. He seems just so disorganized.
I think the jury's seen various neuropsych overviews. But do you agree he was tested in tens and tens and tens of categories?
Yes.
Did you see any of them below average?
No.
Did you see many above average?
Yes.
IQ, for instance, was 114. Is that right?
That's my recollection.
And for like a 75-year-old man with a college education, is that good?
Yeah, it's above average.
Okay. What's average again?
100.
Okay. Now I think they're going to say, hey, the family members are saying, we're noticing he's angrier than he used to be, or that he can't drive and read at the same time. There's things he can't multitask.
I can't drive and read at the same
Can you
time. I'll
comment
cause
on
an
that?
accident.
Yeah, that was a weird example to use,
So,
because that's like
in
something that he
people
apparently did like once or twice,
like Mr.
maybe when the
Sanderson,
kids
who
were
are
little.
high functioning at baseline, above average IQ, superior in some categories like you described, a drop in functioning might still look like he's really high functioning compared to the average population. And the family will pick up on some of these changes, right? They see what they see. That concludes that.
Okay. So if you did meet with Mr. Sanderson and he kept obsessively bringing up, I think the ski collision caused this, what would you say?
I would say that it's my job as a neurologist to help him accept that that's not part of what he's experiencing now. Way more likely than not, he has a history of depression and anxiety. We know he continues to be anxious, so that needs treatment. And I would, evaluate for dementia, like we said, as would be indicated by his imaging.
Okay.
And so my job is to help the patient and family gain acceptance that this mild event 7 years ago isn't causing all these problems that he's having now.
Or any of them.
Right.
Didn't you tell me the cure for Mr. Sanderson is the end of this lawsuit?
Correct.
Come on.
No foundation, relevance, improper questioning.
Overruled.
Go ahead.
Just want to flag for the jury
Is
that we
that
don't
your
like this.
opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I felt anxious coming here.
I also object to that. It's not in his report. Nowhere to be found.
Overruled.
Go ahead. Just explain that, and then I'm sitting down.
Oh,
I mean,
please. Thank you.
Suing somebody, going through a trial that has, national recognition can bring on a lot of anxiety. And if you're prone to that, it's gonna make it worse, and it's gonna slow your recovery.
His daughter said this notoriety makes him feel powerful. Did you read that in Jenny's deposition?
I did.
Objection, Your Honor. Jenny's deposition is not in evidence.
Sustained. Is it coming into evidence, counsel?
If we have time, we're going to read it in.
Well,
It's
you
been
can't-
referenced multiple times.
Ain't here yet.
If you're planning to ask this witness about evidence that's not part of the case or won't be part of the case, then it's an improper question.
Okay, if he's read it as part of his opinions, experts can rely upon hearsay.
They can.
Yeah, but it's not referenced in his report, Your Honor.
Well, if it's not in his report, then sustained.
Okay, I'll let you go. Thank you.
You never want to end your direct
Mr.
on a
Sykes.
sustained objection.
God, I hope this guy's better.
Steve North was one of those.
This attorney also has had a cough the entire time.
Doctor, do you commonly render opinions on your patients without a clinical exam?
No.
In the last 100 patients that you've seen or that are referred to you, how many have you rendered opinions on for other doctors without an examination, a clinical exam?
So, I mean, we do have conversations with other doctors where they say, hey, you know, what do you think about this case? And I may render an opinion without seeing the patient. But if it's my own patient, then it's part of my standard evaluation to see them.
Good answer.
If it's your own patient, your last 1,000 patients
He's
that
not
were your
his
own
patient.
patients, you would never render
Right.
opinions about them without a clinical exam. Is that a fair
He's
statement?
not his patient.
No,
Never.
I would form an opinion, but I wouldn't create a treatment plan and execute on it.
It's a
without
different
seeing-
format,
A
technically.
clinical
right?
exam, would you agree, for this jury, is an important factor for a physician?
It'd be great if he
Correct.
was like, in situations
No.
unlike this, where it is my
Did you
patient,
read the
yes.
opinion of Dr. Edgley testified yesterday?
The no, I did not.
If he called a clinical exam the gold standard for a physician, would you agree or disagree with that?
Overruled as to relevance, the jury will recall the testimony of Dr. Edgley.
Well, in all honesty, he didn't say it in his testimony. He said it in his report. I'm asking if he said it in his report, would that make a difference?
Your
Trying to be
Honor,
honest
that's
here.
referencing testimony that's not, there are no facts and evidence.
I withdraw the question.
Thank you.
But would you agree, excuse me, that a clinical examination is the gold standard for a physician who's treating somebody?
I'm not sure what a gold standard means.
Pretty important.
It's a big part of my evaluation.
Excuse me.
God bless it.
Let
me guess. He coughs
Only he
every
would turn
time
off
he
the
Second, I
light.
looked through your opinion pretty carefully.
Yeah, right.
It was about 4 or 5 pages. I noted, let me see if I can get it here handy.
It sounds like he's criticizing expert witness testimony. The expert witnesses never or seldom examine the other people, correct?
Well, I'll just ask
Yeah,
you to
well,
remember
there
this.
have been some experts on the plaintiff side that did examine him, but that makes sense because he's the plaintiff.
But you had a list of
Oftentimes, the defense has a harder
things that you
time
reviewed, is that
getting
right?
access to
Yes.
the opposing party.
Can you tell this jury a summary of what Carlene Davidson said in her deposition about Terry before and after the ski crash?
I can't from memory.
Okay. Can you tell the jury what Ollie Gresham, the daughter, said about Terry before and after the ski crash?
Take your mic with you. Can you
Yes,
do
I
that,
did, I
maybe?
did read
No, he'll
Ms.
comment.
Gresham's deposition this weekend, or her statement.
He's trying to spread his germs around the courtroom.
Didn't read Carlene Davidson?
I think I did, but I can't remember all the names. If you want to show it to me, I can comment on it.
Tell the jury, if you can, what important information about Terry before and after the ski crash Polly Gresham said.
So she feels that he, is not as engaged and able to do things in the way that he used to. I think that's probably the summary.
That's a pretty mild statement of it, isn't it? Didn't in fact she say, Polly Gresham, daughter, excuse me, that there was a marked and sudden difference in her father in a wide variety of areas: personality, executive functioning, social problems after the ski crash, almost immediately.
Objection.
Didn't she say that?
Testimony.
I'm not sure she said executive functioning, but the rest of it sounds familiar.
Did you read Shay Harris' deposition?
Remind me of the relationship?
Daughter.
No, I did not.
Okay. Those three are listed. And did you read or not read Carlene Davidson?
I read it, but I can't remember what it says.
You read it, but you can't remember it. Tell the jury if Shay Harris is listed there as one you had. SHAE.
I don't see it.
Going to be EA.
1 second, John.
Is this really a gotcha
pacing.
or no?
The pacing in all of these cross examinations has just been so slow.
So he's publishing our report, Your Honor.
Let me show you what you wrote.
Can we move to admit our report?
Just for illustrative purposes, I want to show what he wrote.
What does that mean?
I guess I don't, you may be opening the door to the report.
Go ahead and do
Yeah,
that.
100%.
Okay. Take a look at it. Items
Like,
4,
if you're not
L,
impeaching,
M, and N.
you're just using it as evidence?
Correct. I don't see Shay Harris, like you said. I think that was the question.
Okay. You know what? You're right. I don't see her there. This
Oh,
is
wow.
Carly. So, the defense did not give you Shay Harris, right?
Sorry, I made a mistake.
Hypothetically, if Shay said there was a very, very sudden change in my dad before and after for what we call neuropsychological symptoms, would that make a difference in your opinion?
It might have made a difference at the time,
Okay.
but at this point in time, it would not.
Carlene Davidson testified. She was the second witness in the trial last week. Does this ring a bell that she was living with Terry for about a year and a half before the ski accident? Does that ring a bell?
That does.
And she was up here about 300 days a year in Salt Lake.
From St. George, right? That was, yeah.
And they also spent time in St. George together.
Yep.
And they went on international trips together.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yes.
Do you think she would get to know him pretty well during that time?
Yes.
Same, January.
She testified that there was a rapid and severe change in Terry after the ski crash that lasted, and she stayed with him for 6 months and then they parted ways. She said she was heartbroken. She was hoping for a marriage out of this.
Your Honor, this compound.
Sustained?
Okay? She was hoping for a marriage out of this. Do you remember that in her deposition?
Yes.
Yeah. But he changed fundamentally after the ski crash. Now, does that make a difference in your opinions at all?
I mean, it would be part of the whole compendium of what I would put together. Yes.
I didn't read anything about that. I read your report. It's about 4 pages. Aside from their depositions that you referenced, you don't say anything at all in your report about the rapid and fundamental changes that occurred to Terry after the ski crash, do you? Don't even mention them. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, are you familiar with the term executive functioning?
Yes.
Is that something that neurologists use, term that neurologists use?
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah. Because you realize, of course, as a neurologist, that you can have massive changes in a person with a mild TBI that don't show up on imaging, right?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier in your testimony. And a category of those changes It's called executive functioning, right?
That is one manifestation, potentially, yes.
It's one category.
Yeah.
And I didn't see the word executive functioning even addressed in your report. Not even a mention, correct?
Sorry, is that a question? Or
Yeah, correct.
What's the question?
I like him that he's not
Inflection for a
answering
question.
unless
Yes.
it's a question. He's forcing them.
Is it in my report?
Yeah.
No, it's not in the report.
Okay. Hey, Pete, would you?
Yeah, he definitely is careful to respond.
Like earlier when he just shut up, that was really well done. And then, is that correct? It's like,
Now, while he's doing that,
look,
could you define for the jury executive functioning
It's
in a medical sense?
the ability to do things, to start actions and carry through with them.
To start actions into what? I'm sorry.
Carry the actions through.
True, yeah. It's self-regulated, self-directed action, right?
Correct.
Okay. And that people use that to manage their affairs effectively.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
Have you heard of Sam Goldstein?
I mean, I know of his report as I testified earlier, and I read some of his deposition. Actually saw his testimony.
He testified here. And by the way, were you aware that he is a world-renowned neuropsychologist from Salt Lake City?
Yes.
Yeah. And he developed an executive function test.
Correct.
Can you see it on your screen there?
I do.
Yeah. And here's what he recorded with a high confidence level. That this man, Terry Sanderson, who was a former captain in the United States Army, ran eye clinics for the Army, has an advanced degree in optometry, which I think is a 4-year degree, if I'm not mistaken.
Redundant.
And ran 2 clinics in Southern Idaho.
Check the box. Remind the jury that he's a veteran.
Okay. Would that indicate to you a man of superior intelligence and executive function?
Yes.
Yeah. Let's see what he did here. Okay. On attention, he was in the 25th percentile. Does that strike you as strange, or just average, by the way? 25th percentile. In other words, out of 100 people, he's 25 lowest, right?
That's correct.
That's what that means. Yeah.
Yep.
That for a man of his attainment, he's only the 25th percentile on attention. World-renowned neuropsychologist recorded this. Does that strike you as odd?
Strikes me as him having issues like we talked about.
Let's go to
medical condition.
I'm sorry.
Good answer.
I'll skip emotional just to.
I was saying, I think, these are data and they're good data, and it reinforces my stance that Mr. Sanderson needs help. He's got depression and anxiety, and I think this could be consistent with dementia as well.
Okay. By the way, let me show you where it's at.
Notice his coughing goes away when he thinks he's winning. It's just my opinion, but
intentional?
well, I don't know. He's been smooth now for a while, right? He's got his stats, he's got his expert, and no coughing. Earlier, Egyptians, things that are messing with his timing, all of a sudden he's just about to fall out on the floor. It's just
Do you have the
interesting.
number of that?
Yeah, it was.
It is an interesting thing. I don't know that I would go.
Sir, can I just
I
ask
don't
what
know.
date this is?
I don't know if I would say that
Okay.
he's
This
capable
is
of
2021.
timing his coughs like that.
Well, I don't know that it's conscious, but I'm telling you it's happening. This is like a tick or a tell. I mean, he does. Look at,
Interesting.
if he has pressure, he coughs every freaking time.
Defense exhibits and plaintiff's exhibits. Can you show us where there's a diagnosis of dementia? This is going back to 2009 and up through, I think, 2021.
What hasn't been made yet?
Hasn't been made. Okay. So,
Because
you would agree, for the jury's help here, despite the fact that we're in a very important worldwide case, okay, like you mentioned, kind of paraphrasing your words. There's no diagnosis of dementia.
Hasn't been made yet. Yeah, because we're talking about a minor brain injury that happened in 2016
Okay.
and not allowing him to move on to have a true diagnosis.
Let's talk about
That's an
flexibility.
interesting point.
Exhibit 43. Low average.
I don't know if that's very
23rd
compelling,
percentile
but it's an
for
interesting
flexibility of a man who ran 2 clinics in southern Idaho. Does that sound really low?
Sounds low. Yeah.
By the way, you asked me the date. I think this was done in 2020.
Okay.
You check that. I think it's 2020. Okay. It's just a couple. Organization. Now, the ability to organize things is a very important part of executive function, isn't it?
Correct.
Very important part. 3rd percentile. 3rd percentile.
I don't know what.
Now,
when was this test?
I'm just a
taken?
simple country
Has there
lawyer.
been one done since?
If that were me, I'd understand it.
Done before the
But
accident.
I didn't run 2 clinics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
3rd percentile. Does that strike you as indicative of something wrong here?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Planning. And by the way, below average. Below average. Excuse me. Planning. 4th percentile. Below average. Does that strike you as very low for a man of his attainment?
Very low.
Self-monitoring. 10%. That strike you as very low for a man of his attainment.
It does.
What about working memory? For a man who did everything he did, working memory of 5 percentile.
It's low.
All right. Now,
Can we make one more comment on that, by the way?
Well-
Or do you want to move on?
oh, let's
Redirect.
just move on.
It's related
Yeah,
to
how we
Goldstein's
doing?
report.
What's that?
You know, my impression from
Oh, he's
Goldstein's
letting him
report is
go.
That's why he was recommending the cholinesterase inhibitor, is based on these kinds of findings.
Well,
Which is a treatment for dementia.
if
Oh,
you don't
we
remember
got that one.
specific
Whoa, he
things
stuck it
about
in.
executive functioning
Oh,
of this family, do you?
you,
No.
you don't let him just
Or
opine
from
like that on
Carlene.
cross-examination.
But Carlene told this jury just a week ago that there was a major change in these things overnight, and she couldn't live with it. All right, now
What about the next girlfriend though after her? She's been mentioned a couple times.
God, this guy's more competent than both lawyers.
I don't get a cold very often, but this is a killer.
That's typically been the case
killing us.
with these expert witnesses.
Did you see anywhere in these records? Okay, now let me just preface this. Terry Sanderson has been a patient of Veterans Administration. He was a veteran.
Yep.
I think
Hammering that in once more.
since the early part of the century, early 2000s, when he moved down here from Idaho.
Right.
And he's got a lot of records there. And there are a lot of records that you read after February 26th of 2016, correct? Yeah. Now, in those records, do you see anywhere where Terry Sanderson was accused of faking, malingering, or magnifying symptoms for money?
No, sir.
Nothing there, is it? Okay. Nowhere where he says, I'm in it for the money.
No.
And did you read the reports of Goldstein, Fong, and Gibby?
I did. Yeah.
They're all treating physicians for him.
Correct.
You aware of that? Treating.
Yes.
Okay. They're all pretty competent, aren't they?
Yes.
Dr. Fong said she's treated thousands of patients with mild TBI. You aware of that?
I wasn't aware of the number, but I
Yeah.
know that she treats.
She
mild
missed
TBI.
trial here because she's lecturing over in Holland on what she does. She's lecturing in the Netherlands.
My expert's better than your expert.
You aware of that?
No, I'm not.
I think she was going to Spain after that. Anyway.
Who cares? Objection relevant.
And she said, and by the way, are you aware that these kind of doctors, at least the neuropsychologists, they give tests that have cleverly embedded tests for malingering? You aware of that?
I am. Yeah.
And neither the VA or these three doctors found any suggestion of faking or malingering or magnification, or you aware of that?
Correct.
Or any suggestion that he's doing this for money.
Right. I didn't.
It's an insulting comment.
Why don't you let him
But
respond?
there's no suggestion of that, is there?
I didn't see any evidence.
Do you think he's doing it for money?
I don't know. I have no.
He is suing.
Thank you.
I think there's a price.
Now, respect to.
There's a chance.
Well, I mean, why are we here?
You got a thing up there about his scans, CT and MRI. Remember that chart?
Correct.
And you saw Dr. Black.
Yes, I did.
His testimony a few minutes ago.
Yes, I did.
Okay. And do you remember him saying that from 2009 through 2021, there's no indication of a change on these scans?
Correct.
Yeah. So there's no deterioration. That's the big point. He hasn't deteriorated on the scans, has he?
Correct. That was Dr. Black's testimony.
And you agree that he had a mild concussion?
Correct. More likely than not.
Likely not. Okay, that's good enough.
Why didn't you start with
and
that?
You also agree that he's not, and I think in your report, you said, Mr. Owen said 1%, but you said 5% of people with this condition, mild traumatic brain injury, do not recover completely.
Correct.
Okay. Now, do you think that an executive functioning outcome like that is more toward the 5%? What do you think?
I don't.
You don't?
No.
Okay. Is the fact that the people that love him, that know him the best, say there was a significant and sudden dramatic change in him after this ski crash, do you think that moves him more toward the 5%?
I don't.
You don't?
Dumb questions.
Mark Taylor, thanks so much for becoming a YouTube member. Welcome to Bike Club.
You think the fact that no one has diagnosed him with any other condition like dementia moves him more toward the 5%?
No.
You think that the fact that no one's diagnosed him with faking, malingering, magnification moves him more toward the 5%?
No.
Okay. We talked about atrophy in the aging brain.
Yes.
Okay? That is a normal condition, right?
It can be.
And it's asymptomatic in many people.
It can be.
Okay? Yeah, one more question. I'll talk to my compatriots back here. Are you familiar with the pre-existing exacerbation issue medically with brain injury? In other words, let me explain that. If you have a pre-existing, let's say you have a problem with anger regulation or some other negative quality, okay, then oftentimes a TBI, even a mild TBI, can exacerbate those symptoms. You aware of that?
I am.
And that's a true principle of medicine, isn't it?
Correct.
Okay, 1 second.
You're right. They suck. They both suck. This guy's terrible. His last questions are awful. He's like, so it doesn't move you towards it? No. I mean, and he's stressing the 5%. That's telling me only 1 out of 20. So it's rare. And it's like he's stressing the rare. It's almost like he's
Who's
arguing
had a
out of it.
concussion is at
I don't
greater
think Claire's
risk
paying attention at this point.
if they have another concussion. Second injury syndrome, they call it.
Yes.
Okay. That's all I've got, Judge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
I
Owens?
wouldn't redirect. I'd let it go.
there might be some things that might be advantageous if they want to try to re-stick the landing when he gaffed a little
Well,
bit
he already
before.
did it 4 times, right? Trying to restick
Well,
in
yeah,
his
maybe.
current. I'm sorry. Take off your mask.
Right.
And James, are you hooked up? Thanks.
I think the mask is there because he's like, this other guy's
in
been
our last
coughing this
witness
entire
with Dr.
time.
Black,
I'm
we
trying to be
actually
considerate of
referred to a
everyone in the room.
document.
I don't know. Or maybe he
Uh,
genuinely is concerned.
Plaintiff 33.
As
page
subtle as this guy is,
8
why doesn't he pull out a plague mask?
And it was admitted.
That's true. Also, Gwyneth Paltrow may have told him like, "Hey, look,
And we're gonna.
you got to
Oh,
put a
yeah.
mask on."
and
I'm
maybe
not.
I wouldn't
you know,
doubt
like,
it.
Just number
I could see
2,
that.
if you would. I don't know if are you able just to clear number 2? Do you remember? This is part of Dr. Fong's document.
Yes.
And
This
do
guy
you recall
reminds me of
plaintiff's
Matt
counsel say,
Taibbi,
show me in those records where it says the word dementia.
Yes.
All right, so let's look at this. The most likely diagnosis for this appearance is normal pressure hydrocephalus. The differential would include normal aging brain, Alzheimer's, dementia, subcortical arteriosclerotic
Ay.
encephalopathy,
Nice.
and
Practice these terms,
multi-infarct dementia. All right, this
That was
is
good.
plaintiff's own retained expert,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And she's talking about, hey, could be some dementia stuff going on here, right?
Correct.
Objection, Your Honor. That's a differential diagnosis. It doesn't suggest it's going on.
That's a speaking objection, Your Honor. It's inappropriate.
It's an inappropriate,
Overruled.
Also,
You can cross-examine. You can cross-examine the witness,
And
counsel.
then, Peter, if you can hear my voice, come back in. I had him go make some copies of another dementia reference that we'll pull up in just a minute.
Nice.
Do you remember any reference in the VA where the patient actually came to the doctor and said, I'm worried that I am getting dementia?
Yes.
And what do you recall?
Ooh.
I think that might have been his treating psychiatrist, Michael McIntosh. Does this sound familiar?
I think that's right.
And-
we would
and-
say,
Do you recall, Peter's making copies, but do you recall what he responded?
I don't.
Okay, we'll pull that up in just a minute.
Why did you interrupt him when he was
In
trying
terms
to
of
give
how
more?
close these daughters were in their
Doesn't
personal
matter.
So
observations,
frustrating. So
did you
frustrating.
observe that Polly Graham Sanderson had not even seen or talked to her dad for 3 months prior to this ski collision?
Yes.
Objection leading.
Sustained.
They all lived out of state. Is that fair? All 3 daughters lived out of
Again,
state from him.
Leading.
Your Honor, that's beyond the scope.
It's
Overruled.
Yeah, no, it's within the scope.
Yes.
I'm talking about the relationship and their ability to see him.
And he had, in fact, at the time of the ski collision, he wasn't running a 2-office optometry visit. He'd been retired
Bingo.
for years,
That's what I was gonna
correct?
ask.
Correct.
And there's been evidence that he left on bad terms with his partners.
Objection, Your Honor. There's no evidence of that, and it's beyond the scope.
Overruled.
And it's
There is
irrelevant.
evidence of that.
Do you recall this?
I'm sorry, I don't recall that part.
That he left on poor terms. He left his community on poor terms, his business. I'll clarify my question. So I don't want just continuing speaking objections.
Sure.
Yeah, that is something that is very annoying that Sykes is starting to do more and more, which is not just saying, Your Honor, objection, may I approach, because that would be much more appropriate, because then you're not signaling to the jury all of these problems that you have, because if you get overruled, then like you've already kind of planted in the jury's mind, like, I have all of these problems with this. This is wrong.
Right now,
this is
while
wrong.
we talk about this,
Okay, so now we're going to have some discussion while the jury leaves. This will be interesting. This will be very interesting. We have heard some testimony about the fact that he and his business partner in their optometry office left on poor terms. I think it was Shay, his daughter, that testified that she was like, there may have been some kind of an issue. I don't know the details, And
Has
that
a
it,
business partner been called to the stand?
You know,
Is he
I
alive?
understand your issue that you think it's collateral impeachment and that it's beyond the scope of cross. I'm going to overrule the objections, but ask that there not be a lot of repetition. I think that the door was opened when this witness was asked about the before and the after from family.
Yeah.
So
I'm trying to recall my last
Fair.
question too, that was, the objection was sustained or it was
Overruled.
rejected.
and then, but there was continuing talk and I never even got to ask it.
Well, you'll have a few minutes to reorient yourself. Dr. Hesh, you can certainly step down during the break.
Okay. So we have a continued break here. But yeah, it's
He never let that in. And it's a collateral issue, which I'm going to have to go into and consume time and waste. It makes no difference in the cases years before. Even if it's true.
I thought there was testimony of both parties. Well, I thought there was testimony of issues with when he left his business, that there were issues.
I don't think so. And so,
Your Honor.
so just let me finish.
Sure.
So, I mean, we can't bring up.
Oh, so one guy could talk on and on and on.
No,
but the other one can't
I'm
interrupt?
asking
Oh,
you
these guys are
to
dicks.
explain well, first of all, where did that come in?
Sure. It's in Terry's deposition, by the way. I think he even used the word like his partner had,
If it's in
Cheap shot at him or
his
something.
deposition, then it's not in the record.
only because I have been able to finish with Terry, but his own daughter, for instance, said that he enjoyed a good reputation until his affair in that community. That was in the
What?
record. That's in
Was that in the
evidence.
record?
That's in evidence.
It is.
I think you sustained an objection to that, didn't you?
No, that's in evidence.
No, it's in evidence because you were making him out to be just this beautifully respected man in the community, and his own daughter said,
Yeah, that was
Not
Jay
so.
that said that.
Well, I think
Fair is one thing, but I mean.
business partner
but-
problem.
I don't think that's come up.
It has come up. You just weren't paying attention.
I know I've read it. I just don't know if it came out on the record. I don't think it did.
So I know it to be true because Mr. Sanderson
So
actually, so I asked him, we're not proving truth necessarily right now. We're proving, did you see it in the record? Because they can testify as to what they've reviewed. And then I can follow up on it. So
I
it doesn't
think-
have to be in as a fact.
I think under 403, I'll exclude it. That question,
Which one again? You're on
About the-
business
yeah.
dispute.
business dispute.
Okay.
And, like a certain amount of cross-examination with this witness, and the closer it is to what the daughters observed or didn't observe, the closer it's tethered to that, the more relevant it is to responding to the cross that came out. But if you're, to pull out, I guess, the defense's laundry list of complaints about the plaintiff, or not complaints, but points, I don't know that this is the most appropriate place to do that, given the scope of direct.
All the family members are saying he had dramatic changes before. And
Right.
I've been saying, actually, they're pretty distant. And
Sure.
so
So questions that are tethered to those issues are fine.
okay. And just so we know what we're doing as soon as we go on, we're going to present VA record 922 to 924.
And then what, so that's defense exhibits what? Are you introducing these or are you just showing them?
I'm about to find out.
Because some of these,
Are they, we got to, here's we need to remind the city and state.
just need to know if you're introducing them or I gave you an annotated one.
And just for the future, I'd like to reiterate that when you have an objection, all I need is objection.
Yes.
And the rule. What rule? And if I need more information, I'll ask for it.
Yeah, because it's very improper. He's just grandstanding for the jury
Sure.
when he's going on and on about why this is so objectionable.
We usually take about 10 minutes for these breaks. So.
He knows what he's doing.
Oh yeah. Oh, of course. But this is a tendency that has been growing, and I think that probably is because the judge hasn't been reprimanding him for doing it. So, okay. Well,
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, a question on that. I would think that the business partner stuff or whatever could potentially be brought in simply because of that masterful survey about all of his conditions. There's nothing from what I've heard stating that wasn't already the case before the accident. It's just saying he's got a ton of problems. And the witness agreed. Yeah, that's bad. Yeah, it's bad. Yeah, that's bad. But how did they draw the parallel that the accident was causal to that, especially if there was some sort of business relationship, personal affairs, odd things that are going on in the personal life that could imply that there was some sort of condition or something going on beforehand. Wouldn't that be relevant that there's a business, problems?
Or that he's had problems with his relationships, his closest relationships for a long time, like, because they're pointing to there's evidence of this dramatic change, that it was overnight after the ski collision. He was a wonderful man, just a beautiful, happy, joyful guy before, and now after the collision, boom, he's a monster. So it is relevant to rebut that claim, to say, like, look, he was kind of pushed out of the community because it turns out that he apparently had some kind of an affair during his marriage. And also he had a very poor ending to his optometry practice
which could be shading or potentially, bad choices or whatever, and impulse control. And I don't know. I would think that that's really extremely relevant. And I don't know why they're arguing that in. Why wouldn't it just be, the reporter just said it was all bad, but these are all bad things that were there.
Yeah. And the thing is that, like, I mean, there are two different ways that the plaintiff side could go about this too. Is one, they can continue to fight and say, like, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about it. Or they could take the approach to say, you know what, this has already kind of been teased out in the daughter's testimony, because Terry Sanderson was the last one for Team Plaintiff to testify. So they already saw all of the other testimony that came out beforehand. They could say, you know what, there's already this idea that's getting put in front of the jury. We should be the first ones to talk about it when he gets on the stand, and we should ask him about it. Get in front of it.
Yeah, I'm so confused. And then I feel like the lawyers are just horrible. Like the Owens or whatever. Everything he was asking to me was answered in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And it was done. And then he's like trying to bring in other doctors, and that was very confusing to me. And I'm just trying to think, if I was a juror, it's like I'm losing track of the point here.
Yeah.
But the other guy isn't doing any better in that regard. I thought that he actually helped out the expert by pointing out the rarity of it and saying, so you're sticking with your opinion? Yeah. I mean, because he wasn't, I think it was supposed to be like some sort of a loading, like, even knowing that all these other 20 factors, you still are standing by it. He didn't really say that. He just said, so you're standing by it.
Yeah.
I'm confused.
Yeah. It seems like both sides, they're kind of just sort of swinging from the hip, instead of like planning out what it is that they want to ask ahead of time. Like, these are the most important points, and this is how we want to get there, and in a way that that other people can follow. I mean, one thing to keep in mind is I don't know how many trials that either of these firms have done, because this is civil litigation. Civil litigation is often hard to get into trial. I know that very well from personal experience. It can get the banker's boxes in the courtroom, and boss turns to you and says, the parties want to settle. That was my experience. But
isn't that usually the case? I mean, even Johnny Depp and them settled. Ultimately.
You mean Well, yeah, but that was after that they settled the appeal after the trial court level. But yeah, it is way more common for cases to settle, which is to say that I don't know how many trials each of these teams has done. So, are they in practice with, lining up their questions to create a show for the jury? Because you have people that have human brains that have to be able to follow the testimony, understand the point that you're getting to, and there's so much airtime in between these questions that by the time they get to their next question, you're like, what was the last question? What did he just say?
Even the questions, and I don't know if it's a good analogy, but it just popped in my mind. Have you ever heard or seen comedians that just aren't funny, and they're depending on delivery? I feel like they're kind of doing that here. Like, you went to the store, didn't you? Yeah, I did. No, but and it's like there's accusatory tone or delivery, but it's not actually
any rulings of the court, any arguments of the lawyers, anything that's going on. I would hate to have to ask, someone to leave. So if you could please keep your thoughts to yourself, keep your reactions or emotions, even your facial expressions until the court's not in session. So thank you.
And let me get some questions answered here. Grant McRoberts, why is this lawyer facing the opposite direction when asking the questions? Keeps looking to his right. First off, thanks for the super chat. Second, he's turning towards the jury. He's essentially cross-examination is really where the lawyer is supposed to be testifying. They're just asking these questions and just getting a yes or no. That's the ideal. Is you want all of the focus on the lawyer. You want as the lawyer doing the cross-examination, you want that jury looking at you, connecting with you, so that they are getting your story. And this guy's just confirming it.
Are you saying look at this guy?
Yeah.
Mr. Owens, you may continue. Just let me know, I've got another court hearing at noon.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Hard-working judge.
I'm circulating Defense Exhibit 114. May I approach you?
You may.
That was Mr. Bites.
Do you mind if I hand it to the witness?
You may.
We may get you a copy.
And it's exhibit what?
114.
Okay.
D114.
Did you say D as in dog?
D as in defendant, yes.
Okay. And does the plaintiff have any objection to this witness or this exhibit?
I was a little sorry towards the judge.
Defendant's exhibit 114D.
Could have just said yes, Your Honor.
No, I love it.
If you don't have time, you can go ahead and examine the witness without displaying it.
Like, if you're going to be snarky to anyone, the last person that should be towards is the judge.
Jeez, no kidding. Wow.
Blanked out. Thank you very much. Okay, we're good. Have you seen this document?
I can't remember.
This is part of his VA records. It's dated May 22, 2017. Bottom right is marked VA 922.
Yes.
So if the incident was in February 2016, this is about a year and 3 months later. You with me?
Yes.
And if we go to the second page, VA 923, and James is going to bring this up. You see under the subjective, and James, I think the address is there, so you want to get rid of it. I'm going to come show you where I'm going to start reading. Patient reportedly.
Yes.
Okay, that's the first paragraph. And where's our cool laser? I'm going to start, this is a big sentence, but I'm going to start right here. Patient reportedly, and I'll read this. Patient reportedly sought out neuropsychological testing for these symptoms and also feared he may be experiencing early dementia
There it is.
symptoms. Mr. Sanderson noted that he felt reassured following the testing, but is still concerned regarding some of the cognitive changes he has experienced.
Uh-oh.
So that's another reference to him being concerned with dementia. True?
I mean,
True.
it does say that the testing shows that he
That's
doesn't
all on
necessarily
that.
have it.
You can take that
It's,
down.
it's a year and a half after the accident, though. Was the accident causal or
Does that
contributory?
rely on the patient?
That's a good point too. Yeah.
Some subjective reports from the patient.
I believe so, but I'll have to defer to our neuropsychology experts later today.
Okay, they're going to come up here and talk about that, so we'll be okay with that. Patients can throw neuro testing, though, can't they? Can
Yes.
they, like, fill in the tic-tac-toe, and the patient can actually say, I don't know.
Objection, don't show.
Overruled?
Yes.
I mean, we can't force him to put a 0 where it belongs and an X
said
where it
yes.
belongs. Fair?
Correct.
And are you aware of studies that say being a litigant in a case like this actually frequently leads to patients overstating their damages?
Objection, 401, 403, and beyond scope.
Overruled?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Just comment on what you know on that.
So I would say it's more just knowing from medical school and learning about, what malingering is, as opposed to studies that you state.
Okay, malingering is a word that means basically not trying as hard. Is that fair?
Correct, for secondary gain.
If I malinger, if I have a stubborn cough that's malingering,
Oh!
is that the right use of that word?
Oh,
No, it would be
that.
if you were elaborating your symptoms,
Is he,
like you
is he
said, not
suggesting
filling
that
in
the cough is
tic-tac-toe
fake?
in order to have some type of secondary gain.
Did he just suggest that the cough is fake? No way.
Oh, if he wasn't such a dick, that was pretty good.
What we do know is that he ran a business in Idaho many years earlier. True?
True.
Objection, Your Honor, same thing we talked about.
Overruled?
True.
And then he retired in part due to failing eyesight. Do you know that?
I don't know that.
All right. And do you know anything about losing the respect of his community, which his daughter reported to this jury?
Objection, leading.
Overruled?
Sounds familiar, but I don't know the details on that.
Due to an affair he had. He thought.
Objection, Your Honor. 401, 403.
Sustained?
Thank you.
I think it's in evidence, and I think he should be able to reference it.
Same objection.
But I'll respect your
ruling.
What do you want, a cookie?
Can anxiety and depression and hyperfixation, can they throw off executive functioning?
Yes.
All right. One thing Sam Goldstein said the other day was that he's obsessed. He's obsessed with this case, this notoriety, this media. Can that throw off if someone's obsessed, can that throw off their executive functioning?
Yes.
Objection, foundation.
Overruled?
Just
Yeah.
comment on that for me, please.
He's going to say why.
Yeah. So being obsessed, being extremely anxious, or having other, being depressed, kind of that's a whole continuum, can cause a whole host of cognitive dysfunction, including executive function, but also problems with concentration, attention, memory, all the above.
I'm being told to sit down. I'm sitting down.
Don't do that. Why are you like? I'm being told
Mr.
that James
Sykes?
should be the person in the lead on this team. Okay, recross. Just sit down. Just say, I have no further questions.
He's got to be the smartest guy in the room. It's an issue with him. His own witness, everybody else. He's always got to be more clever. More.
The progress note.
You're such a
From
nerd.
the VA, May 22, 2017. I'm just looking at it. Exhibit 114. Okay.
Yes, sir.
This was the reason. Read that to the jury. The reason for the visit.
Would you like me to read it? Oh,
No.
Scheduled psychotherapy intake.
Okay. And the chief complaint: anxiety, adjustment to medical condition. See that?
Yes.
Okay. And then on page 2, some of the things that weren't read. I'm going to see if I get those up there. Let's see. No. It says subjective. Now, Mr. Owens read you part of that. Okay. Can you see what I'm referring to here?
Yes.
Okay. He says, recently referred by Dr. Manson following neuropsych testing, where anxiety was suspected to be affecting patients' cognitive functioning. You see that?
Yes.
Yeah. And Mr. Sanderson reported that he was in a ski accident 1.5 years ago, where he was hit by another skier who lost control. He reportedly had a 5-minute LOC and broke 4 ribs. You see that?
Yes.
And he was evaluated and told he had a concussion.
Yes.
Right? And that's actually what happened. He was evaluated and told he had a concussion, wasn't he?
Yeah. That's
by,
what we
by
discussed.
several.
Yeah.
He said that over the past year and a half, his cognition has gradually improved. Right?
Correct.
Now, people that are malingering don't go tell their doctors that they've improved, do they?
I don't know that I can make that general statement, but I think the fact that he improved, we talked about, which is a sign of.
But he has continued to have
concussion.
difficulties.
Your Honor,
With,
Bob interrupted my client.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Sorry, my expert.
I'm
Can
sorry.
you
I'm
finish?
sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah. Did you finish your response?
Well, I was just saying that we did talk about this earlier, that he had gotten better from the concussion.
Not gotten completely better, but he improved, right?
He improved.
His cognition has gradually improved.
I'm trying to think who.
But he's continued to
I know a lot
have
of people
difficulties
like
with
Luther, but that's-
motivation,
No.
Not the-
energy,
not the bald
Matt-
head.
and anhedonia.
Matt Tiabi
That's
or
a
Taibbi.
term that the jury may not understand.
I wasn't thinking him. I was thinking some specific
Loss of
actor.
enjoyment of life.
Correct.
Okay.
I don't.
So, at least 2 of the 3 of those are things you commonly see with executive functioning problems, aren't they? Motivation, energy.
Correct.
J.K. Simmons.
He also described difficulties with spatial tasks such as driving, getting lost, and puzzles. Those are frequently executive functioning problems, aren't they?
Yeah. There are also major signs of dementia.
Okay. He reportedly sought out neuropsychological testing for these symptoms, but also feared that he may be experiencing early dementia symptoms. Okay.
It was smart for him
Yeah.
to think that.
Smart. Mr. Sanderson noted that he felt reassured following the testing, but is still concerned regarding some of the cognitive changes he has experienced, right?
Correct.
And you understand that he was tested and told he doesn't have dementia. You understand that?
Yes.
And no diagnosis of
Correct.
dementia, ever. Right?
Correct.
Okay. Now,
No,
also,
I don't know.
a patient, or sometimes neuropsychologists call them clients, but you call them patients, right?
Correct.
Patient or a client who has high scores in some areas is not generally a person who's trying to fake it, right?
Correct.
High scores, right?
Correct.
And in some areas, some intellectual areas, Terry Sanderson has super high scores on testing, super high, right?
That's right.
Hold on one second, Your Honor. I think I got it here. No further questions.
Mr. Owens?
No, Your Honor, no more questions. Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Thank you, Dr.
you.
Hesh. You're excused.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Just leave it right there in front. Thanks.
Oh, you know what? I do have one more. Do you mind if I just take one more minute with him?
I think he's excused. Sorry, Mr. Sykes.
Yeah, but still, in the courtroom.
Do you have another minute?
Very short.
All right, come on in. So you're still under oath?
I apologize for missing. You talked a little bit about NPH,
Yes,
normal pressure hydrocephaly or hydrocephalus.
that's correct.
Okay. That is a condition, is it not, that can exist for years and years and years without any symptoms.
Correct.
And the three main symptoms of NPH, if it's active, okay, are ataxia, dementia, and loss of continence.
Correct.
Okay. And
Ataxia being problems walking.
problem
Right.
walking. And there's no diagnosis
I was right about that
anywhere in
earlier.
those records before you that anybody ever diagnosed with NPH.
That's right.
Okay. And a lot of good doctors looked at him, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Owens?
Entirely separate from the ski accident, do you believe Mr. Sanderson would benefit from anti-dementia medications?
Your Honor, I've checked. That's beyond the scope. I asked only about NPH.
That was Your Honor, he overruled. Go ahead.
I think it's worth a trial. Low side effects, and it could help him.
And Sam Goldstein felt the same way.
Correct.
That's all. Thank you.
Ooh,
Good job.
there
Mr.
you go.
Sykes,
That's how
anything
you.
further?
That's how you end it.
Okay, thank you.
You should now run from the courtroom.
Why do you do? Why
Don't
you
do it. Yeah. You don't need to. You don't need to be so clever. You don't just let him
Mr.
go.
Owens, you may call your next witness.
Thank you. James has this one. I'm giving the clerk.
Thank God James has this one.
Your Honor, we call Dr. Angela Eastfold, a neuropsychology expert.
Thank you.
Okay, let me try to get some of these super chats.
Is this
real
guy
quick.
okay?
Oh wait, I already got this one.
Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give in the case now before the court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Good morning. Would you take a seat and then state your name and spell it?
Oh, you don't know. Okay. My name is Angela Eastfold, ANGELA EASTVOLD.
Thanks for being here, Dr. Eastfold. And I believe, Your Honor, you said you have a hearing at noon. And so we'll be quick for the first part here. Would you like to end right at noon or a little bit before?
Maybe a couple minutes before would be great.
Okay, great.
One or two.
Sure. I'll
What
keep my
time
eye on
zone
the
are
clock.
they in? Mountain?
Mountain time.
Dr. Eastfold,
So 15 minutes.
what do you understand your role to be in this case?
I was hired to review the records and provide opinions on the facts around his injury.
Okay, and were you asked to look at Dr. Goldstein, plaintiff's neuropsychology expert, and his evaluation in particular?
Yes,
But you looked at everything. You looked at all the records,
I did.
and we don't have to name them all. There are thousands, correct?
Yes,
And they span what period? Do you recall?
2004 to 2022.
Okay. And I think after we come back from the break, we'll do what we did with Dr. Hesh. You have a report that also has some headings, and that will help us take you through those. But if we may start with just a general understanding of your expertise and why the jury should listen to you about these matters.
So I'm a board certified neuropsychologist. I have a PhD in clinical psychology with a specialization in neuropsychology. I then completed a 2-year fellowship at the Veterans Hospital in Tampa, Florida, where I received 2 years of specialized training in the full spectrum of brain injury, from mild to severe. And brain injury has been my primary area of expertise since. I was then a faculty in the neurology department at the University of Utah for 6 years. And during that time, I regularly lectured to physicians and psychologists and trainees on concussions and provided continuing education courses on concussion diagnosis and management of this. And then since 2011, I've also been an independent consultant to professional sports teams as part of their concussion protocol. That is all required now. So when a player gets a concussion, they are required to have an evaluation by me in order to be cleared to return to play. So I am deeply involved in concussion. And for the past 2 years, my work is 80% concussion.
So in your review of Mr. Sanderson's medical history and,
she's probably
and
going
other
up
records, I guess we should mention, did you review the Deer Valley records?
I did.
Okay, the incident report and the instructor comments, these accident records, you reviewed those?
Yes,
And you reviewed depositions connected to the events of the collision?
I did.
So in your review of all of that, what is your opinion about Mr. Sanderson as it relates to concussion?
You want me to go into my first opinion?
Yeah, we'll get to it, but just for the general overview.
In general, that if he suffered a concussion, it was at most a mild concussion.
Great. And what about the symptoms connected to that concussion if he had one?
I believe that the symptoms resolved, or the symptoms that were there might be better explained by other conditions.
That pre-existed the collision?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a good just general overview. Anything else you'd add as a general overview of your opinions?
No.
That's a good, just short, again, we'll get into
introduction.
details.
Yes, there's a lot of details I'm looking forward to going into.
Okay, great. So I want to pull up the exhibit that the jury was just looking at with Dr. Hesh. It's Plaintiff's Exhibit P43. I just switched my iPad here into the system. It looks like it's taken a second. This is the executive functioning table. Do you recall seeing that?
I do.
And do you recall reviewing that in Dr. Goldstein's evaluation of Mr. Sanderson?
I do.
And that's where this comes from.
Correct.
And I'm going to just pull it up right here and ask you, what does this table, what is it trying to accomplish?
Okay, this is important. So this is a self-report measure that Dr. Goldstein himself designed and published. I can't speak to it. It's not something that is commonly administered in clinical practice for adults. I've never seen it used anywhere other than Dr. Goldstein. So I can't speak about the validity of these scales. But what I can say is that this is a really nice quantification of the patient's subjective complaints. It is not evidence of objective deficits. It's just a summary and quantification of what the patient is reporting.
Jeez,
wow, that is a great way to start.
If you would, for the jury, when you use those terms subjective and objective in a neuropsychological sense, what do you mean by them?
So subjective is just the patient's opinion or perception. Objective is something that is measurable. And when we get into the neuropsychological test results, those numbers are objective data. And I will later show you how some of these contradict some of the objective data.
So is it your opinion that the results here that plaintiff's attorneys have been going through, those represent only Mr. Sanderson's report of his own sense of his executive functioning?
Exactly.
So much stronger.
And there's other evaluating physicians
Just
or
start
neuropsychologists
in
that have done
really strong.
objective evaluations. Is that correct?
See?
Correct.
A better
And
attorney.
can you give us a just brief sense of
Good witness,
what those
too.
are, when they happened?
Good witness too.
So he had a battery of tests that measure multiple areas of attention 1 month post-injury. He had a battery of tests that measures multiple aspects of memory 2 months post-injury. And then he had a full neuropsychological evaluation 1 year post-injury.
And what did those exams
And then he had
show?
Dr. Goldstein's evaluation, which is 4 years post-injury.
Right, thank you. So in all of those evaluations, what would you say as a summary of the findings? You
No.
can take them one by one if that's best.
Your Honor, I object. There's nothing in her report about this.
There,
It is in my report, and
Yeah,
I would love to be able to talk about it in the context of my first, of my
So you have to
opinions.
listen to the
I'll have to
judge.
deal with the objection. That's okay. That's quite all right. I will do that. Maybe we could do that over lunch.
Sure.
And do you have another area that you want to go into for the next 5
It
minutes?
seems like this is a good time to wrap up.
Okay. Why don't we take our recess now and then we'll return at 1:25.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, she did a great job gutting that other doctor and his report in such a classy manner that you're just going, wait, well, what? And she was like,
Yes.
oh, this is a really remarkably quantified report, and like buttering up and then just slicing. Yes.
Yes,
Wow, that
especially
was
because-
devastating.
Because that was the one thing that seemed to really come out of the cross-examination from the plaintiff side in the last
The
witness was
deposition,
this
is that
report. And it
right?
was like, well, okay, these look pretty low. These numbers look pretty
And then I can
low.
address your objection.
And then she just like swoops right in and says, oh, by the way, they're all subjective and it's all just self-reporting by the plaintiff and it's not objective and it conflicts with other objective data.
The last 5 hours or so of evidence. If we can get an update, we would like one.
Okay, yeah, we can do that over the noon hour. All right, so remind me again, what was your question, Mr. Egan?
I was just asking about the post-accident evaluations, and she does discuss those, I believe, under section 3 of her report. And maybe also in section 1.
Maybe you can talk into the mic.
In March and April of 2016, she talks about those there. And then she talks about Goldstein's in the 2017 Dr. Madison evaluation in point 3.
Okay, and so that was the direction that you were going based on using the parameters of her reporting?
Yes.
All she
Okay,
talks about is March and April of 2016, March 8th of 2016.
This is under 3, neuropsychological evaluation completed by Dr. Madison, 2017.
This guy's so much more effective.
Evaluation in 2020.
He just
Okay.
seems to know this case.
so the
inside and
subject
out. He
matter in
knows all the
general is certainly
witnesses,
within the
knows,
scope
you know,
of her report, so objection will
See
be
that?
overruled.
That's what Your Honor.
As I said, it's
But-
under
but-
point 3, and if you go a couple paragraphs in.
sometimes it's effective where like, I mean, we've seen cases where
Excuse me.
the lawyer just continues to argue after the judge has made a ruling and then the judge ends up
All right,
changing
so
their ruling.
objection's overruled on that question, and
Sometimes it's
if you
effective,
need
as annoying as
the
it is.
court, I mean, this pretrial should take no more than 45 minutes, so you can let the clerk know and we could get back together if necessary, but otherwise, 1:25.
Should we clear off the tables?
No, I'll go to the next courtroom.
Just update, we intend to ask our 2 neuropsych people, and then I intend to ask Terry Sanderson to the stand. Can we confirm?
Oh, he is coming back.
Will be in the courtroom this afternoon.
Please don't be the one out talking to him.
They released Terry Sanderson. They said they weren't going to call him again.
Yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday.
So were you
But that was for the, to complete their cross of the
They
scope
can
of your
still
direct.
call him.
They're going to call them under the rules as the adverse witness in their own case, so.
Ooh.
Anything else, counsel?
No, I just want to make sure he's in the courtroom this afternoon.
Oh, good
In the
job.
courtroom or available to testify?
Well, I thought he was going skiing. So
Okay. Can you make him available, Mr. Sykes, this afternoon? No problem, right? Okay, thank you.
Oh, another
Okay.
joker. Wow. Okay, this guy's far more effective. And by the way he just handled that attorney is just like, oh, here, look. It's in here.
Like
here,
it's
here.
right
The
here.
plaintiff
Just
has used
casual,
42
no-
minutes and the defendant has used 1 hour and 35 minutes. 42 minutes for the plaintiff, 1 hour and 35 minutes for the defendant. Thank you.
Oh, I did not catch those numbers.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If I have time.
I'll back it up. I don't know.
Yeah. I'll get it later. Okay. So so they're on lunch. 1:25 is when they're coming back. So we'll do a second live stream for the afternoon. But your thoughts on this last witness?
She was better in 3 minutes than the whole damn morning.
Yeah. Especially because
even when she made a mistake, there was a humility there that was appealing. She just is likable, and the attorney is likable by staying the hell out of her way. He's not trying to upstage his witness and everybody else in the courtroom. He's just kind of like, okay, it's like he knows his place. Even here, do you notice how he's standing there, hand behind his back, kind of respectfully, very respectful of the courtroom. He just gives off a far more earnest demeanor and is just naturally more likable. And I feel like he can pull out wins just by being likable.
Yeah. And he always comes across as organized, like he knows the questions that he's going to be asking, whereas all of the other witnesses, the other attorneys, other than there's one, I don't know his name on the other side, but he's kind of like a bigger man. He's got like brown hair. He's a little younger than the other guys on the team, but he's also done some direct and cross examinations, and he's pretty effective as well. But yeah, by and large, there's just a lot of this, like, we'll just kind of figure out what we're going to ask when we're up there and asking. Like that's really how much it, or how it all feels. But yet I agree. I think that having an expert witness just swoop in with the TLDR at the very beginning and to say like the succinct reasons why he or she thinks that way is just devastating. And what's beautiful about the timing.
The jury's going to lunch with it. It's like, oh yeah, go think about that bullshit report.
That's exactly what I was just going to say is that, you know, with the timing of it, I don't know if they planned it out or they could have planned it out, but now they are left with the jurors going to lunch and thinking, okay, so that whole chart we can just disregard because that's what this guy says, you know, unless they are believing the things that Terry has said already, you know. So then they may be like, okay, well, you know, that's up to him. But, you know, if they're tending to not believe Terry Sanderson at this point, they're probably just going to be like, bye with this chart. So
yeah, no, I totally agree. Just so much
completely,
so much more effective.
Yeah. Let me get these super chats. I've been meaning to get to them. Stephanie Pott, thanks so much for the super chat. Love your channel. If someone lacks vision in one eye, it would affect depth perception, possibly cause him to misconstrue any orientation of people. That is definitely the position that the defense has and what they are trying to port. Something just fell in the other room. Mr. Bites is on it, I think. That was very, very loud. I hope everything's okay. Anyway, but yeah, that is what the defense is definitely putting forward and what they want the jury to adopt. I don't know if you guys think that may have been the case. That I kind of have that sense at this point.
But he does such a crappy job of clarity, and that's why it's so refreshing with James. Is absolutely on point. There's no. Now, he didn't get all of his words right. He misread a couple things, but he just was on point. It's very clear, and then he lets her talk.
Yeah. I
mean, it's so frustrating. It's just like, why couldn't this guy be talking to the witness? The witness was good, but he got buried because the guy goes on and on and on, and I lost the message of the first witness that I saw. I don't know if there's others.
And I think it's even more annoying because of the fact that there is so much dead space between their questions. So it's like, we're waiting on this lawyer to ask the next question. Then he asks the question and the witness is like partway through answering. And then they get to the next question. It's very frustrating. The pace is very frustrating to follow. But yeah, Stephanie, yeah, that's a good point. Amelia Brown, quick question about what you were talking about slightly earlier. Do you think the plaintiff's side has made a sufficient eggshell skull argument to this point? I think they've done a good job of it in their case in chief. It's still an open question for me, which I think is good for the plaintiff side, because we've had some experts testifying now to these pre-existing conditions so far. So I'm not convinced by the defense's side that it's not an eggshell skull kind of situation. But in order to get to that point, you already have to have decided whether or not you believe that the plaintiff has met his burden as to whether Gwyneth Paltrow crashed into him from uphill on the mountain. So, and that I'm not convinced at all that he's met his burden.
One thing, have you noticed this, or maybe I'm reading too much into it, but especially Owen, I think they're making a mistake because there's a mocking, snarky tone with him about the plaintiff. I personally feel they should be sympathetic to the plaintiff. And as a jury member, if he's going through dementia naturally, this is a nightmare. All these things are a nightmare. And I think that there's kind of just a dismissal of a human being that is not necessarily helpful. I think it would be more like, I'm sorry. And I think that the first witness is very good about that. Like, he was sympathetic to the person. And I just think that would be so much more powerful, but that's my opinion. I don't know if you're seeing that.
I think that in some cases there is good strategy behind being snarky and being like, this is absolutely ridiculous. Like, why are we even here? Like, that can come out and work in some cases. Like, like I remember there were no cameras in the courtroom, but the Kevin Spacey trial that happened however many months ago, that was about I think it was another defamation case where he was suing. He was suing the guy that came out and accused him of SA years ago. And I remember reading the reporting on the opening statements, and his attorney was like, this is absolutely ridiculous. This person is in it for the fame, in it for the money, in it for, like really, really laying into like the other party is an absolutely atrocious person. And I remember I was like,
character assassination. So that kind of makes sense because it is like a counter punch. Like, this person claimed that you are a monster. You are the worst human on the. This isn't that. It's just saying this guy's saying that they're both sides admit there was an accident. And so I know I get what you're saying, but on that one, oh, absolutely. You're going to be hot. If somebody's calling you a predator.
This is a different kind of situation, because if your argument is he has all of these pre-existing conditions that, this is a natural progression. He's an old man that's getting old. Like,
you're terrible. I'm sorry.
You're kind of jumping on an old man. Yeah. Like, it does leave a bad taste in the mouth about it, because you can agree with Gwyneth Paltrow's case and come at it from multiple perspectives. You can either say this guy is a lying liar who lies and he's in it for the fame and the money and the notoriety. And, the notoriety of this case makes him feel powerful, and that's why he's doing it. And he's just kind of this narcissistic prick. You might be under that impression, or you might be under the impression that this is a guy who went through something. He has some amnesia about the incident itself. He was told by his friend, who was also there around 40 feet away at the time of the incident, who told you that this is what happened and how things happened, and that you adopted that and decided to move forward with that. Like that is, not knowing, but believing. And that guy had a sincere but incorrect belief in what he saw. Like, that is also possible here. So, so you have to be careful if you're Gwyneth Paltrow's team in sort of like stomping all over this other guy, because the jury might be saying, I believe that this guy is wrong about what he alleges happened here, but I don't think he's a bad person for it.
And I want to punish you because you're a dick. No, I mean, seriously, there's a quality of the lawyer. It's like, you're so snarky and all that. It's like, well, I really wasn't sure, but you're such a dick. I just kind of going to just give him a little bit of a bone here because you are angering me personally.
Yeah. Yeah. Brittany Chanel, what do you rate court so far in terms of performance of lawyers and testimonies? James Egan is at the top. He's really the only one that when he gets up to direct or cross, I'm like, oh, thank God. Because everybody else, I'm like, other than, like I said, that one other attorney from the other side that I unfortunately don't know his name. But with everybody else, I'm like, this is going to be a little bit of a slog, or I'm going to get irritated by what this guy is saying and suggesting. And the testimonies, yesterday's expert witness who testified to the biomechanical engineering was my favorite. I think he might actually be my favorite witness in this trial so far. But I did think that on the plaintiff side, Carlene Davidson, the ex-girlfriend, I found her to be a very credible witness. She seemed very, very honest. Like even at times when it wasn't exactly advantageous to the plaintiff side, she also revealed to she also revealed to the jury that there was a girlfriend after her relationship ended with Terry Sanderson. So he had some other girlfriend for some period of time. So this idea that he very dramatically let her go because he was like, oh, woe is me. I'm this broken man now. You shouldn't have to be held back by me. Like, move forward and go on with your life. Like this idea, I don't buy that based on the fact that this other girlfriend existed. And I really want to hear it. Like, I am personally very thankful that they are actually calling Terry Sanderson as an adverse witness, because there were so many pieces that they didn't go into with the plaintiff on cross-examination. So yeah. Those are my thoughts so far on that. Debbie Faison Cook, why do they keep asking experts about other people's depots? It's because this is common practice. Expert witnesses, remember, are the only ones who can give their opinion about something, and that opinion is always going to be closely tied to their area of expertise. If they start talking about other stuff, they'll get an objection saying that it's outside the scope of their expertise. But this is a battle of the experts. So you are going to see every single expert witness talking about the other side's expert and saying, well, this is where they went wrong in their analysis. And this is why they got a different conclusion. And I think that's incorrect because XYZ. They're basically fighting each other's underlying reasoning to their conclusions, because obviously their conclusions are going to be different because they're being called by the opposing sides. Like, the plaintiff is not going to call any experts that don't say what he wants them to say. Not to say that that's incorrect, but it's just that particular expert comes with their own a professional opinion. It's like, you've got all these lawyers on YouTube. We don't always agree on how we see things, right? So these guys will disagree as well.
I wish they do a better job of it, though. Because he would bring up other experts, but how does it tie to this one? I don't know. I didn't hear a clear question as in such and such expert tested this, which seems to go against what you just said here. Mm-hmm. Why is that wrong? To use the negative or other expert to hopefully buttress your own. I didn't feel any of that. I just felt, well, what do you think of their opinion? What do you think of but I don't understand it. I didn't get the point. And I admit I'm dumb, but I just didn't get it.
But that's why yesterday's expert on biomechanical engineering is my favorite witness right now, is because they had him up on a whiteboard going through the actual calculations, like the physics calculations of the other expert, and saying, now he added this piece right here, and this is incorrect because XYZ. And this is how you end up with an incorrect, conclusion based on the math there. And so he went through boom, 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 boom. And this is how I would do it. And he literally has on the board, an arrow, correct, incorrect. He made it so clear for anyone to understand, okay, this is how this is supposed to be calculated. And the cross-examination was just laughable. I mean,
Who was the
I
lawyer
was-
with that witness yesterday?
It was Bueller. So not the one that just did the cross-examination with the cough, but the other one.
Okay. I was gonna say
Yeah.
it couldn't have been the first two because they suck so bad from what I've seen.
Yeah, and the direct examination for that was, of course, done by James Egan. So, which shouldn't surprise anyone at this point if you're familiar with the way that these attorneys have been doing their work here. Girl Scout that wants to know: do expert witnesses take classes on how to testify effectively in trial? I don't know of any. I don't know of any classes, to be honest. It wouldn't surprise me if there was some sort of instruction somewhere, in like a continuing education kind of course that they can do to like understand the process and like what's best and what's not. But I also wouldn't be surprised if most experts didn't take some kind of a class and they just sort of had conversations with lawyers.
I think they have informal training. I do know that there are witness prep people out there, but I don't think that it's like a public thing. I think that's a really they're very secret and high powered, kind of like the same people who train royalty on how to do public presentations. I would love to ask Mark Bowden, for example, of the behavior panel, because he trains world leaders and things. I think there's a little bit of that going on, but they're not exactly going to say, oh, here's the expert 101 training class. These are hired guns that are probably quietly brought in.
I do think that for most cases where an expert witness is brought in, most of that is just going to be like an informal conversation with the attorney on the case, saying like here, because what you do is when you retain an expert is first you talk to them, you tell them about the case, you tell them about maybe some of your strengths and weaknesses, the evidence that's come out in discovery so far. And so to say what is your area of expertise, like how would you look at a case like this? You might have a conversation like over the phone like that, and then oftentimes like they'll ask for information, they'll they might write up some kind of a report, send it to you. And then like you'll make a decision as to whether or not you want to retain that expert, partly based on what their opinion was, but also like their reasoning and how strong it is that they came to that conclusion. So there's a whole process that you go through. And
you mock trial them. You also do a mock trial with them quite often.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, depending on the funds that you have for that case, because if it's a relatively smaller case, you might not do something like that, but where it's on a national scale, I would expect it. Lara K wants to know, are they both in court today? They are both in court today. You probably saw that by the time I answered this. That was a question from a while ago. Amanda S, when someone says they don't have the expertise to answer, is that a bad thing? I think that's a good thing, because I think that is, the jury is more likely to look at that expert witness and say that they understand the limitations of what it is that they are there to testify. It's just like I talked yesterday about how it's almost better to have an expert witness that says, more likely than not, this is what I think is the likely, outcome here, as opposed to having a very strong and hard conclusion. Like Dr. Bain on the plaintiff side said, it is impossible for Terry Sanderson have been the one to have hit Gwyneth Paltrow, because for him to say it is impossible for Gwyneth Paltrow's account to be correct because of like the math and the physics of it, all the other side has to do then is to show a reasonable and plausible way that is in fact possible, and they did that in spades. That was with, again, my favorite witness. So I think that like when the jury is looking at these experts, they're usually like, okay, yes, you have a lot of expertise, yes, you are here as a hired gun, like are you overstating your conclusions? And is that going to get undercut by the other side's evidence and testimony? So it's a lot better for them to be reasonable and to understand their own limitations. Yes, exactly. So, okay. Well, that's all the questions that I've got here saved. So I probably should wrap this stream up, and then we'll start a new stream for the afternoon. That'll be at 1:30 p.m. Mountain Time. So, Eric, I would love to have you back if you're free. If you're not, I completely understand, but you're more than welcome to come back. This has been great.
All right, I'll try to. I don't know if I can. I've got to be on another show this afternoon.
Completely understand.
In England, but yeah, I mean, this is interesting. I'm still playing catch up.
No, I like having you kind of airdrop in, because it's nice to be able to sort of like explain. I'm sure there are other people that are watching too that have maybe not been watching the entire trial and kind of getting bits and pieces of it. So your questions about this stuff and how you're taking this stuff in is actually very, very helpful, I think.
Well, thank you. I feel like I'm missing the good. I want to watch the good lawyer, though. Not the crappy lawyer.
I know.
Like, that's not fair. Oh my God.
Oh man. So, alrighty. Well, thank you everybody for being here and for watching, and thank you once again, as always, to the mods for marshaling a healthy and robust discussion in the chat. Disagreement is always welcome, and I appreciate everyone for bringing all their thoughts on all of these things. So, okay, I will see you guys in the next stream at 1:30 p.m. Mountain Time. See ya.